Did we do it? Have we done it? Are we here? We're doing it. We're streaming. We hit it. Look at the beautifulness. Look at the glory. Bear witness to the, like, one of the awesomest things that J.R.R. Tolkien said. The most improper job of any man, even saints, is bossing other men. Not one in a million is fit for it, and at least of all those who seek the opportunity. J.R.R. Tolkien. Hope you guys are all doing really well out there in the world. I think I got a little sick, honestly. I'm just like feeling blech, and the weather's been blech. Blech is the word. Blech is the word. Although I have like so many things to share. I've got so many things to share. This is going to be such a good sharing episode. I'll be surprised if I get to all of them, which means you'll have to tune in tomorrow to see all the other stuff. But there's like, I feel like so much happened this weekend. I think I'm going to start pretty light. Good evening to you, Kevin. Good to see you, man. Let's start with something light today. Yeah, be sure to like and share and all that stuff. You know what to do. I don't need to tell you. Let's start with a really lighthearted, beautiful story. Oh, a man named Stark. I think you're the first time I've ever seen you in here, Stark. Good to see you. Hope you're here to be beautiful. So let's start with a nice lighthearted story. Conton, I know you're going to like this story, my man. Worst New York City landlord attacked upon arrival at Rikers. May have broken bones in face. Source. Such good news. I'm so glad that bad things are happening to landlords. The man known as one of New York City's most notoriously negligent landlords was briefly hospitalized following attack at Rikers Island. Daniel, look at this name, Oeb Shalom, turned himself into police on Thursday after allegedly failing to perform hundreds of court-ordered repairs on some Manhattan properties he owns. He was taken to Rikers, where he expected to serve up to 60 days. A source close to Oed Shalom said the landlord may have broken facial bones Friday afternoon after being punched in the face by another person in custody. What a legend. What an absolute legend. The assault occurred at the intake area of the Eric M. Taylor Center around 12:15 p.m. So literally the guy shows up at Rikers, is like, hello, I'm a landlord, and somebody just goes, ugh, like Homer Simpson style. Just like, boom, right into the face. Oeb Shalom's injuries were said to be non-life-threatening, and he was taken back to Rikers late Friday. Sources don't believe Oeb Shalom was targeted because the assailant threatened a number of other people in custody as well. Good work. Good work, guy. Threaten a lot of people so that when you get the landlord in the face, they don't, like, hit you with the Mao treatment. In a rare move last week following years of trying to levy fines against the landlord of a Washington Heights building and make emergency fixes, the city issued an arrest warrant against a man they say is a slumlord. Look at this. Look at this. A city in is this New York? Washington Heights? New York? New York. A city in New York City actually sent an arrest warrant out to a landlord. I think there might be hope for us. I think there might be hope for the futures. Right? I think there might be the possibility of some kind of salvation for the Western world. We're arresting landlords. Look at this. Huh? Huh? It's not all bad, right? We're not cratering as fast as possible into total oblivion. We're arresting landlords. And listen to this guy, Mikhail, good to see you. In the two buildings along West 170th Street, the city alleges that Daniel Oeb Shalom and his company, Belmont Ventures LLC, yeah, good, name names. Name names. Show me what this guy looks like. I want to see what this guy looks like after having been punched in the face. Have racked up 700 serious violations affecting health and safety of those who live here. As a result, Housing Preservations and Development Commissioner Adolfo Carrion Jr. stepped up action and issued a warrant. Adolfo Carrion Jr. What a legend. What an absolute legend you are, Adolfo. It's so nice to see that there are people in the world who are willing to do what needs to be done, which is punish landlords, imprison these people, put them in jail. And, like, Faster than this, please. We caught up with him. He's facing $3 million in fines and penalties. And he's going to jail for 60 days. Look at this. Look at this. I hope it's not one of these situations where the guy is like worth like $600 million, and so a $3 million fine is absolutely nothing for this guy. I hope that this is like a serious problem for him and that he has to actually consider like selling properties. Like, I hope it's a major concern. For years, tenant Sonia Peralta and her neighbors have complained about conditions in their apartment. We have rats, roaches, no heat or hot water. No heat or hot water. Like, come on, we're gonna have a little celebration. We're so happy that's happening. It's about time. Yeah, good for you, Sonia. Good for you. Go buy yourself a McCain's Deep and Delicious cake. Have a great one. Another tenant said they would go 2 weeks or even a month without hot water. Always during the worst times, of course. It's not the first time the city has taken action over the conditions inside the buildings, including a 7-figure fine issued in 2022. In January 2023, the HPD made nearly $50,000 worth of emergency repairs. Oh, like, why do these people own these properties? Like, take these properties away from these people. Like, forget about fines and shit. Like, fines, jail. Like, I'm a fan of jail. Like, I think these people should be jailed. XD, good to see you, my man. But, like, take the property away from them. Make it so that they don't have the property. Be like, well, you're clearly negligent. You obviously don't want to do this job. You're obviously not interested in doing the job. We've told you to do the job, to the point now where we're like levying major fines and putting you in prison. Just take the property away. Literally, just be like, yeah, you clearly don't want to do this, so you're no longer doing this. To me, that's the solution, right? If you've got like negligent landlords, and this guy's probably like jacking the rent and doing all kinds of dumb stuff all the time, just take the property away, right? Like, if you can't take the property away from these types of people, then like there's just no serious punishment to be had. Like 60 days, like the guy's probably worth like a couple of $1 million. He probably looked at it and was like, yeah, 60 days in prison, that's fine. I'll retire at 24. You know, it's fine. Get punched in the face. Until we see this behind bars and handcuffs, we won't be happy. Yeah, absolutely. The NBC New York reached out to his attorney for comment, but did not return calls. Yeah. I suspect that this guy's going to be straight up no comment the whole time. Taking away their property would be anti-Semitism, John. What a great segue. We're going to save this story for another feel-good story. This one's going to be more along the lines of like, but let's get right into the big news for the day, right? The big news for the day. The news we're all here to talk about. Let's be honest. Gaza Security Council passes resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire during Ramadan. So finally, after several rounds of voting, with very clearly the United States being the impediment, constantly vetoing it. This woman here raising her hand, being like, no, and because I'm the United States, that means no. Literally for like 2 months now, it's been several votes of like 14-1. The entire rest of the world standing up and be like, fuck, ceasefire. Like, what are you talking about? Like, ceasefire. This woman, and look how exhausted and just like depleted she there's just like no soul left in her. She might as well just be a robot who's just like finally they let the ceasefire go through. The UN Security Council adopts a resolution tabled by its 10 non-permanent members demanding a ceasefire in Gaza during Ramadan by a vote of 14 in favor to none against, with 1 abstention. The United States, they couldn't even bring themselves to vote for it. They had to abstain. Like, there's something wrong with the West. There's something wrong in the United States. Like, it's a dark, black hole where even finally, when they turn the corner and they finally say, okay, we've gone too far, we have to stop doing this, it's an abstention, right? Like, it's so bleak. It's just so bleak and dark. Right? And I'm on a couple of subreddits where they like deny that this is a genocide and they deny that this isn't happening, or they pretend like this isn't happening. And it's just like the bleakest, darkest people. Omnicidal, good to see you, my man. Too bad the UN and the ICC and the Hague are all worthless and have no real power against the US and Israel. This is just a nothing burger. I disagree. I do disagree with this. I don't think it is a nothing burger. I think that this does set the stage for serious action that can be taken by citizens, right? Like there are lawsuits in the United States against Joe Biden for aiding and abetting a genocide as the ICC case proceeds. And gains more credibility and becomes more concrete, and they start making more concrete statements. Because right now they're just sitting on, there's plausible evidence for us to see this as a case, which is a huge win, but it's not like click, click, click. It's not locked up. Let's go hang Goebbels, right? Like, we're not there yet. But if you're a politician throughout Europe and Canada, like Canada especially, I think, has been really responsive to this. That's the reason why Canada's been pulling back on a lot of its stuff, even though I've got some articles about that. But the reason why Canada's been acting the way it is because with the way the legislation's been going on, like, you can start trying people. Like, we can take people to Canadian courts, and we can say, you aided and abetted a genocide. The ICC called this a genocide. You funded the genocide. Right now, their case is like, well, we didn't know it was a genocide. And the moment they said it was plausible, we all got together and we voted on it. We stopped arming, and we definitely pulled back on that right away. And then certainly when it came down that it was a genocide, we definitely had nothing to do with that, right? So it's not a nothing burger, right? It's not a nothing burger. It has an impact. It has an effect, and it has. I think it also has just like a profound cultural effect. Like, I think it's going to be impossible for Joe Biden to win the next election. I just don't think he can. Like, he won the last election against Donald Trump by very thin margins, right? Elections are usually decided by very thin margins. And there are going to be huge sections of the populace that are just not going to show up. They're just not going to show up for Joe Biden. And all the Democrats have left is vote blue no matter who. We got to stop the fascist Donald Trump, but they have no credibility left, right? They just don't have any credibility left, and so there is going to be profound action that comes from this. Like this, we straight up could be looking at the death of the Democratic Party, right? Like, we could be looking at just a Democratic Party that's just immolating itself. It has happened in American history before, right? Where a party has just immolated itself and becomes completely unelectable. And that's always sort of the tightrope that American politics walks, is like, at what point is a party going to just immolate and become unelectable? And the Democrats may have crossed that Rubicon. They may have done that. Like, you can literally hold up documents and say, like, you guys straight up did like a black and white naked genocide in front of our eyes. Like, this isn't like, and it's the cold-bloodedness, I think. Like, one of the things that the Republicans got away with George W. Bush is that they conned everybody into, like, oopsie-doo, best intentions. We went in there just trying our best, We went in there cowboy mode, and we tried to say, America's going to go in there. We're going to spread liberty and democracy. They're going to greet us as liberators. Mission accomplished, right? All this kind of stuff. And even into the modern era, people look at George W. Bush and go, what a dummy. What a stupid dummy, right? So that's been the rollout, and everybody kind of bought into that. Everybody bought into the idea that George Bush was a dummy, when in reality he's just a psychopath like the rest of them. Joe Biden doesn't have this excuse. Like he doesn't have the same kind of cover, right? Like, it's pretty obvious that he's in favor of what's been going on. So it's tough. I mean, yeah, if they invade the Hague, right? Like, that's a whole other ball of wax. Imagine the tactical blunder of invading the Hague. I mean, I don't know, dude. Like, we're entering like a real psychopath era. We're entering like a real. The West doesn't know what to do anymore. I think that's the big thing that everybody needs to understand. Like, they really don't know what to do. They're out of options. They've reached the end of their strategic line. They don't know what to do anymore. And we're getting into that kind of mode of like, if all you have is a hammer, then everything's a nail. And so you're going to see the United States just make very stupid decisions, and the West generally. Like when I first heard Macron talking about sending troops to Ukraine, I was like, that's not serious. But as it's going on and as it's going on and as it's going on, I'm just like, I think these guys might actually be serious about this. I think that France might actually be serious about sending troops and actually like meaning it. And like, I'm like, what are they, crazy? And the answer is yeah, they're crazy. Like if you're in France's position where all of your colonies are beginning to declare independence, you're losing a lot of colonial influence. You're no longer getting free money for nothing anymore. You don't produce anything. You don't make anything. You've gutted your manufacturing base, right? You've been relying completely on just extracted wealth from African nations that you colonized. Well, those African nations are starting to say, get out of here. Fuck right off. And so the French are looking around being like, okay, well, what do we do about that? And they're starting to get kind of desperate. And they're starting to see, like, there's these, remember the internal fucking riots that happened in France, like, yesterday? Right? Like, not that long ago, there were these huge goddamn riots that happened. And just, like, the entire society just went up in arms and big flame and cars everywhere and just disaster zones in France. And so Macron is looking to do something to try to send the energy of the populace somewhere, and he might very well just round up troops and start sending them to Ukraine, which is wild. It's just like wild, but they don't know what else to do. They don't have any other solutions, right? They don't do diplomacy. They have a white supremacist ideology that basically says, well, we told those brown people to do this and they should do it, right? Yeah, like, share, subscribe. Thank you, Kevin. Radio, good to see you. Bread Bunny, good to see you. John, how's it going? What's your take on the French government saying it's going to send troops? Oh, I literally just started talking about that. Yeah, the NATO chairman saying the West needs to ready itself for nuclear war, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, like, I think we are witnessing a true, like, I don't want to say apocalypse in the material sense, in, like, nuclear bombs are going to drop and all this kind of stuff and yabba yabba, but, like, an old guard is dying. An old mode of thinking is dying, and they don't know what to do, and they don't know how to respond, because the old way of thinking is dying out. And I even have, I think I hope I still have it, where you're starting to see organizations and figures within the death cult begin to fully recant even. I had an article. I hope I still have it here. I'm gonna find it. Where you have a Princeton. There's a Princeton economist. It's in the Discord. I'll dig it up if I can. A Princeton economist, Angus something or other, right? Who has been like a neoliberal classical economist. Gabriel, good to see you. He's been like a neoliberal economist his whole career, is starting to publish books and articles essentially recanting, essentially saying that, like, the field of economics has gone astray. And his most recent article, I'm actually going to find this article right now, man. This was such a good article that I'm definitely going to dig this up. Stripper Bill of Rights signed into law in Washington State. More good news for everybody. Strippers of the world unite. Thank you. Yeah. Canadian arms embargo. This is the Discord, by the way. If you are not part of the Discord, all you have to do is donate $1 to the Patreon, and it gets you into the Discord. You get to talk to these lovely people, share articles, which I can then share with the wider populace, with the wider people. We can discuss it. It's like, sometimes it's really fun. Sometimes it's total nonsense. That's the nature of this kind of thing. Most of the nonsense comes from me. Did I just lose this article? I'm so mad if I lost this article. I feel like I lost this article. Shoot. Shoot. Oh well, that's life. You got to keep up to date with Jordan Peterson and what he's doing, right? Gotta love it. Okay, I've lost the article. I'm gonna finish up with that. So, Resist, good to see you over on Twitch. The USA is claiming a UNSC resolution is somehow non-binding. Yeah, it's hilarious. It's definitely a binding resolution. The Zionists are defying the resolution, and the U.S. is unlikely to support consequences of this violation. Shit's wild. Yeah. But, like... and while it's all happening... so UN expert says Israel has committed genocide in Gaza, calls for arms embargo, right? So we've got even more credible evidence to show, like, more people are coming out about it. The voices, now that this ceasefire has happened, and now you've got a UN expert saying, like, the voices surrounding the ceasefire movement and the end this war and the end this genocide movement are going to be more emboldened. And, like, it is only a matter of time. Although I would like to point out the irony of, like, this article, and there's a Shen Yu article. Oh, we missed the Shen Yu article. We missed the Shen Yu article, guys. Weird little Nazi cult. So, I definitely don't want to blaze through this, because one of the most prominent conversations that happened during this whole period of time was the Norm Finkelstein, Stephen Bunnell, i.e. Destiny debate. Everybody needs to listen to this. Like, if you get into a conversation with a Destiny stan, if you get into a conversation with a Destiny fan, if you get into conversation with somebody who thinks that Stephen Bunnell is worth listening to and credible, this is literally the only clip you ever need to show them, right? So let's have a fun little listen to this guy.
Did you really message Ben? What do you mean? Yeah, of course. Ever since I started the Israel-Palestine arc, I've gotten so many connections. I've gotten like new payment processors. I get like there's a lot of people there's a lot of organizations that kind of like send me revenue and they shoot me like talking points or whatever, or they'll like recommend me like books. They don't like control what I see on stream, of course, but they'll like suggest like, hey, you should take a look at this. And then, and then they also send like a decent chunk of change. I was like, well, if you're going to pay me, like 30,000 new shekels or whatever, why the fuck would I not take a look at the material that you want me to read and repeat on stream? And also part of this is connecting me to kind of like a network of, they call them the Jalumni. It's like alumni, but for Jews, I guess. And then in these Jalumnis, imagine you kind of have the, like the war room, okay? But it's not actually the war room. They call it the new Yeshuv on Discord. And in this Discord, there's a whole bunch of like really powerful Jewish people that I have access to if I want to chat with them about any particular issue. And Shapiro, obviously, and the other co-owner of the Daily Wire in there. And after my Candace Owens conversation, yeah, I reached in there. I was like, Ben, what the like, this lady is like slandering me on fucking Twitter. Can you do something about this? And he'll tap his Jewish contacts. He'll see how receptive I've been to some of the money that they kind of like funneled to me, told you like talking point shit related to Israel Palestine. And then he said, feels like I checked out. And then, yeah.
And of course, readers added context, missing context. The full clip reveals that he was joking. Yeah, okay, bud. Sure, bud. Like, I don't think that makes it too much better. Right? Like, I don't think it makes it too much better that he's using the Palestinian genocide and his position as a genocide denier, or I should be more clear, pro-genocide position, his extremely racist position, as a joke. Right? So this is either you are a despicable human being because you're just a mercenary with no principles, which is true. Stephen Bunnell is just a mercenary. If the wealth was on the side of the anti-genocide argument, he would be anti-genocide. People would pay him to be anti-genocide. Although no one would pay him to be anti-genocide because he's a moron. And we actually have, like, professors and philosophers and UN specialists. Like, we have like actual professionals and people with like credentials who are intelligent and well-read and who understand the subject on our side. And so we don't need to hire a loser like this. Like, we don't need to hire some weird mercenary gun for hire who's just going to take money in order to espouse talking points that about a subject that he knows nothing about. So you get to pick. It's either that, or he's such a huge loser that he actually thinks this is funny to joke about. So pick your poison there, right? Pick your poison. Yeah, I mean, Destiny liberals troll in the same fashion and manner 4chan alt-righters used to. Yeah, because they're all video gamers, right? It's so funny to me. Like, I'll encounter people who are like confused about who's actually listening to this guy, who's actually paying attention to this guy, and I'm just like, you need to get yourself into a Call of Duty game lobby right away. Like, spend half an hour in a Call of Duty game lobby and do yourself a huge favor. Get into a Call of Duty game lobby and as a woman, and have a woman talk in a Call of Duty game lobby and watch what happens. There are streamers and content creators whose entire stream and what they do. I see them on TikTok. I've seen them on YouTube Shorts. Their entire shtick is that they get into Call of Duty gaming lobbies, and they just start talking as a woman, saying normal stuff like, "Hey, what's the strategy? What are we doing here?" And the men, primarily men playing these games, right, just immediately start saying the most grotesque shit you've ever heard in your life, right? Like, there's a reason why Nazis and people on the far right want talk about free speech, so that when they threaten rape in game lobbies to women, that there'll be no consequences for doing so, right? And once you recognize that those people are the people who are supporting people like Destiny, just these very like incel, closeted, neo-Nazi brained, terrorist-minded losers, it all clicks in and it makes total sense, right? Why a guy like this would have any support whatsoever. He comes from the gaming community, and the gaming community is fanatically racist, and like it's pretty straightforward shit. So it makes sense that they would support a genocide, right? That a group of white supremacists, like they are, would support a genocide against a brown population. And of course, the United States makes the statement, regardless of the UN vote, Israel can continue what it's doing in Gaza. Says it outright, right? Pretty nakedly.
This is the president's reaction to the decision by Netanyahu not to send an Israeli delegation this week.
I got to tell you, Steve, we're kind of perplexed by this. A couple of points that need to be stated and, in fact, restated. Number one, it's a non-binding resolution, so there's no impact at all on Israel.
It's weird that they say it's a non-binding resolution. It's a binding resolution. Like that it's so obvious that it's a binding resolution. Like, why have a UN Security Council if it's a non-binding resolution? Like, what are you talking about? I wish I had that form in front of me. Like, somebody actually went through it and was just like, of course it's a binding resolution. Like, that's the reason. I believe the reason why, when the United States put forward a ceasefire resolution, they put forward a ceasefire resolution that got voted down. And the reason it got voted down is because it was a non-binding resolution. But this resolution that came forward is a binding resolution. So this is just a simple blanket lie. Like, big shocker, everybody. The United States State Department lies, and lies constantly. So here's another lie.
Israel's ability to continue to go after Hamas. Number two, as I said in my opening statement, it does not represent a change at all in our policy. It's very consistent with everything that we've been saying we want to get done here. And we get to decide what our policy is. The Prime Minister's office seems to be indicating through public statements that we somehow changed here. We haven't. And we get to decide what our policy is. It seems like the Prime Minister's office is choosing to create a perception of daylight here when they don't need to do that. So again, no change in our policy.
So just mask off Nazism, straight up. The Highwayman 5 comes in on Twitch on that line. Perfect timing. But, like, just mask off Nazism, right? Like, even though the UN has passed a binding resolution that the United States has now gone along with, there's no change in our policy. We're still going to commit a genocide, right? Like, they're being very open about it. They're being very frank. These are the people in that history will recall as the like Nazi level people who were in charge as their empire crumbled and fell, right? Like the Palestinian genocide has shown the world that the United States no longer has credibility, right? The Highwayman writes, "I'm Palestinian Honduran." Well, glad to have you, friend. And the rest of the world is turning away from the United States. When the United States stands up and says this kind of stuff, it just drives yet another nail into their coffin. So, to pivot away from this story into something that's a little bit more happy, because I don't like to. I'm trying to keep things uplifting. I don't want to leave you in a bind. I feel like sometimes I end these streams and I'm like, man, that was dark right at the end there. That got real dark. Here's a hilarious story. Swept away. $500,000 sand dune built to protect U.S. homes disappears in days. Property owners dumped 15,000 tons of sand in a Massachusetts town to fend off dangerous tides, but it was swept away in 72 hours. A sand dune that cost homeowners on a Massachusetts beach more than $500,000 to construct was washed away after just 3 days. An affluent group of beachfront property owners in Salisbury, Massachusetts, a coastal town 35 miles north of Boston, are mourning the loss of their investment after a safety measure they took to protect their homes failed. The dune, made of 15,000 tons of sand, was meant to keep dangerous tides from encroaching onto the shore and damaging beach houses. The dune had just been completed in February, but was gone within 72 hours. Salisbury Beach Citizens for Change, the volunteer organization behind the Dune Project, said on Facebook that even though the expensive protection mechanism was destroyed within days, the sacrificial dunes did their job, arguing that much more could have been destroyed if it weren't for the presence of the dune. As oceans around the world get warmer, sea level rise due to thermal expansion and weather patterns get more extreme, boosting coastal erosion. Salisbury has suffered from rising sea levels, strong winds, and severe storms in recent months, including 2 in January, that have battered the area. Digital meteorologist Jonathan Bells of the Weather Channel said, "From nor'easters to hurricanes, Salisbury gets touched by several large storms each year. Their proximity to the Atlantic Ocean gives them a source of moisture, and their northern latitude also firmly places them under the powerful jet stream during much of the year," Bells said. The town is also affected by coastal flooding, pushed ashore by storms out in the Atlantic. Now the homeowners have asked the state to step in and provide assistance. You know, the well-known state that's well known for providing assistance. Local news outlet Fox 59 reported that the Republican state senator Bruce Tarr was working to secure a $1.5 million in state funding to replenish the sand. This has a like real like Futurama vibe, where they like get the ice cube from Halley's Comet and drop it in the ocean, and thus solving the problem of global warming forever. But thus solving the problem of global warming forever. Tarr, noting that a more permanent seawall was not an option because hard structures like these are not allowed on Massachusetts beaches, said, "We're managing a natural resource that protects a lot of interests." Straight up, it's just like housewives being like, "But we can't build a thing there. It's the beautiful area. It looks so good. We don't want that to be ruined. It'd be such an eyesore." It's like those people who are like, we don't want windmills because they look ugly. Windmills are so ugly looking, they ruin the natural edifice of the pasture land. When I step out on the prairies and I look out across the prairie land and see the big wide open sky and I see a tiny little windmill dotting the plain line. It just ruins everything for me because I'm an old man with old ideas, and the way I think about the world, seeing it change scares me and fills me with trepidation because I don't know anything about the subject, and things I don't know scare me. Like, it's that kind of mindset. It's that kind of thinking that leads people into these hilarious dead ends, right? You can armor the shore and make it look like a dune, but it won't be a dune. Is this Dune 3? I've heard good things about Dune, by the way. Everybody says that they pulled it off. I can't wait for them to ruin it. Ooh, I'm being tracked. So says Norton. Close. Of course I'm being tracked. Everybody's being tracked. Did you guys know that we're all being tracked by the NSA? And I love that there's like, people are like, oh yeah, if you buy this thing, then they can't track you. Yeah, they can. What are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? So here's an article. This one's going to be a long article, okay? I'm going to warn you of that up front. So go get your tea, go get your pop or whatever, sit down with your popcorn, right? Settle into your video game or whatever it is you're playing, right? This is from the Wall Street Journal. What I loved about this article, and the reason I wanted to read this article, is that it really, really struck me that these authors were not making a propaganda piece on purpose. Most of the time when stuff comes out of the West, they are trying to make a propaganda piece on purpose. What struck me about this particular article is that it was really clear that they were trying to tell an objective story. They were trying to present things with clarity and reality. But because they're rooted in the fanciful world of finance capital, they can't actually tell a story accurately. They can't actually present something factually or based in a material reality because the way they think about the world is not rooted in a material reality. That in today's finance capital world, we're all completely rooted in the belief that if it makes money, that is good. That money is good. If money go up, if line go up, then good. And anything else can be sacrificed to that idea. And if something is not sacrificed to that idea, if line go down, but something good happen, then it's actually still bad. And this ideology is so embedded in the mind of these people that they don't even really realize it. They don't really see that this is a religious ideology that they are following. And I really feel like an article like this is the best thing to read to really illustrate that. China revives socialist ideas to fix its real estate crisis. So I would argue that China has always been operating on socialist ideas, but we don't need to get into a critique of Dangism right now. Xi Jinping aims to put the state back in charge of the crumbling property market, part of a push to rein in the private sector. China's massive property market is crumbling. Xi Jinping wants to revive socialist ideas about housing and put the state back in charge. Home prices across China are falling. Developers have gone bust, and people are doubting whether real estate will ever be a viable investment again. The meltdown is dragging down growth and spooking investors worldwide. This is precisely and exactly what the Dangists predicted would happen. And they literally laid a groundwork, a philosophical groundwork for how to act and what to do when this occurred. That the Dangists understood that bringing capital in would come with great growth, but it would also come with great inequality, and ultimately the capitalist systems would collapse of their own accord. It's so funny because the guys that always say communism never worked, doesn't work anywhere in the world, our history has proven that communism doesn't work. It's like, well, then why do we spend so much money bombing it? Why do we spend so much money destroying communist regimes and overthrowing communist countries? If they're just going to collapse by themselves, why don't you just let them? Right? Why don't you just allow capitalism to happen, right? Which is the superior system, according to you, right? And just have the communist system collapse. And then the capitalists will come in and do capitalism and everything will move on. And all of the people who tried to do communism will go, well, that failed. And obviously it was a big disaster that completely collapsed. But instead of that, you've got to spend trillions of dollars annually in order to destroy communist societies and communist systems. Just let them collapse. And the irony of it is that this is precisely what the Dangists said. That the Dangists stood up and said, yeah, we'll let capitalism in to appease the capitalists so we don't need to fight any goddamn wars anymore. We'll have a huge period of growth followed by that will also bring a period of inequality, but then the systems of capital will collapse, and then we will take those systems over. Right? We'll take those systems over. And it's this kind of illiteracy of Chinese history and of the Chinese government that continues to fuel the religious ideology that authors like this believe in, right? That they believe that capitalism is the greatest thing of all time as a religious ideology. And it's just funny because like they keep saying it's a new strategy and that they're revitalizing, and it just shows you the short-term thinking that these people have. That the short-term thinking that these people have is that, like, literally they only think year over year, while the Chinese are just like, no, we think about the next generation. We think about what's going to happen, right? And we plan for that. And we're a 4,000-year-old civilization. And Americans cannot get their mind around that. Jib Jabby, good to see you. Enjoy the day, John. Thanks for keeping up the effort. Thank you, Jib Jabby. June writes, John, you always say the thing that separates humans from all other animals is the ability to articulate abstract thought. And that's what convinced me that cannibalism is okay. Because when humans die, they lose the ability to articulate abstract thought, and so a human corpse is no different than a corpse of any other animal. June, I feel like you're trolling me right now, June. Cannibalism. Don't do cannibalism. I don't think it's good for you. I think I just think that there's like a health issue there. June, I swear to God, if you turn to cannibalism because of me, I am not going to be okay with it. I'm just going to let you know, okay? If you become a cannibal, just keep my name out of it, okay? Just say that you thought about it and that this is your conclusion, and I don't want to be associated with cannibalism. I don't think it's good. I think it's a bad idea. I think if you're in a desperate situation, you do what you want to do. But I just think that you're setting yourself up. And I don't know, June, maybe this is my hang up. Maybe this is me just being like, I'm not okay with it. And it's just part of my thing. And it's not a rational thing. Where you getting your corpses from? There's a good question. And dude, you don't want to get like a human meat market built into the system of capital, right? Like you don't want humans to start getting raised to be like cattle, to be turned in, like you've got Soylent Green is made of people. I did not think I was going to be talking about cannibalism today, June. All right, I feel like you've caught me with my pants down a little bit. Okay, back to the article. Under the new strategy, which is just the old strategy, the Communist Party would take over a larger share of the market, like it always said it would, which for years has been dominated by the private sector. Underpinning it are two major programs, according to policy advisors involved in the discussions and recent government announcements. Can you imagine if our government had policies and ideas and thoughts? Can you imagine if we were living in a society where we were like, oh, wow, there's a crisis. We should have thoughts and ideas about how to handle that crisis. One involves the state buying up distressed private market projects and converting them into homes that the government would rent out or, in some cases, sell. Right, they're doing the thing I say that we should do. We should create a crown corporation. We should scoop up properties that are in distress. We should scoop up properties that are in kind of a state, and we should rent them out or sell them through this crown corporation. Right? I've said this several times, and China is just going to do that. Why? Because it works. Because it's the solution. The other calls for the state itself to build more subsidized housing for low and middle income families. So again, right, have a crown corporation, hire people from universities, hire architects, hire engineers, hire its own construction crews, and just build them ourselves. We don't need to outsource these to like gangs and loser cabals who are completely incentivized not to finish projects. Right? Finish the projects ourselves. We should go to these projects that are remaining unfinished on purpose, right? Because our system of capital ensures that we will always have unfinished projects, right? It's always in the interest of the capitalist to never finish a project, because then the state is always on the hook. And you can always drain a little bit more capital and a little bit more capital and a little bit more capital. And eventually you just have all of these unfinished projects that you're just draining out the coffers of the treasury of the state in order to keep up the contract and keep on the hook. And you never actually have to do any work, and you never have to actually do anything. Well, the state comes in, scoops them up, says the contract's been resolved, right? And then we finish up those properties and we sell them or rent them. Right? And just get rid of these capitalists, because they're obviously the problem. And that looks to me like what China is doing, because China is ruled through Marxist thinking. That they actually look at Marx and they actually go like, well, what would be a solution to this problem? What's actually happening? Oh, that's the solution to the problem? Okay, do it. And if a bunch of capitalists whine about it, the Chinese go, and they move on with their lives. Right? Which you're going to see as this article continues. The goal, policy advisors say, is to increase the share of housing built by the state for low-cost rental or sale under restricted conditions to at least 30% of China's housing stock from 5% or so today. Sounds great to me. The plan lines up with Xi's broader push in recent years to expand party control over the economy and rein in the private sector, just like Deng said they would. That push has included regulatory crackdowns on technology firms, such as Jack Ma-backed Ant Group, and more investment in state-owned enterprises in preferred industries, such as semiconductors. Beijing's economic mandarins, I love that they gotta do this, eh? They really gotta do it. They can't just not be like Orientalist and racist. They can't just be like Beijing's economists. They gotta be like Beijing's economic mandarins. Led by Xi's top economic policy aide, Vice Premier He Lifeng, are still hammering out how to execute the real estate strategy. Imagine having people who are actually trying to execute on a real estate strategy. Imagine having a real estate strategy in government. Imagine, like so crazy. That would be authoritarian though, right? Economists caution that the plan could take years to achieve, if it's achievable at all. Note, they say economists, right? This line here, I love it. Economists caution, so not economic mandarins, but economists. Who are these economists? Probably some fucking losers from Chicago, right? Probably some Milton Friedman losers whose strategy is the best way to build a housing market is to destroy a housing market, right? The cost would be huge. Now, here we're getting into the thing that the West actually cares about, the money, right? They don't care about the human life. They don't care about things being better for people. They care about the money, right? This would be huge. Cost would be huge. Potentially up to $280 billion a year for the next 5 years. $280 billion a year? That's not huge. What are you talking about? China's economy is like a $5, $6, $7 trillion economy. What are you talking about? Right? What are you actually talking about? It's not huge. $280 billion a year? It's a fart in a bucket. It's nothing. The United States spends like $1 trillion on its military every year. We talk about $280 billion a year. Huge. It's embarrassing that these people talk this way. Mark Brassey, don't know if I've ever seen you here before. So, Stark, if you're still here, I'd like you to know this too. When I got first timers in here, I do try to answer your questions, right? I want you to know that I'm here to engage with you guys and to answer questions, because I really, really value that you're even in the chat. It matters a lot to me. So Mark asks, so do you believe China is still committed to the attainment of an unequivocal communist system? I hope that's the case. Some communists would argue they've abandoned communism in favor of revision. So the thing that convinces me that China has always been pursuing this Marxist idea of moving towards communism is that they've always been very upfront about it. And they've laid out a strategy, they've laid out a plan, they've laid out an argument, they've laid out a conversation, and they've always explained themselves, right? Deng was very straightforward that China needed to move away from internal class struggle in order to gain its own prosperity, so that it could defend itself from external threats, and that defense from external threats, I think it's justifiable. It is completely justifiable to say that if you have the external threat of Western capitalism, Western imperialism, right? Which, remember, when Deng was coming to power, it was in the shadow of the Vietnam War, the Korean War, the Cambodian and Laos Wars, Kissinger's secret war, right? The Chinese were well aware. They had just watched the Americans drop 2 nuclear bombs on Japan right off their coast. Right? They were very aware of what Western capital and Western imperialism was willing to do. And China knew that it was on a knife's edge with America. And they looked at the Soviet Union, which very recently lost 25 million people to capitalist imperialism. And so China goes into a period of appeasement. Just like Russia. Russia has done the same thing, right? It went into a period of appeasement. The Chinese went into this period of appeasement without needing to lose 100 million citizens first, right? But the Chinese didn't feel the need to have this war. They decided to choose a new battleground, and that battleground would be the economic battleground, because it was a battleground that they thought that they could win. And it looks to me that they are winning. And all of this was clearly argued and clearly stated, right? This isn't just pulling it out of my ass. Read the works of Deng. Marxists themselves will criticize this, and what they'll say is that, oh, this is revisionist and all this. It's like, no, it's not revisionist. It's using Marxism in the manner that is intended to be used, which is as a tool to analyze material and historical reality and make decisions for the betterment of your own society. And the Chinese were faced with this very simple option: go to war with America, lose millions of lives. This is what most Western Marxists would want China to do, by the way. Maoists are like this too, where they're like, yep, they should have gone to war, should have threatened nuclear war, should have lost millions of lives, had tons of infrastructure bombed out, right? This is what the Chinese should have done, definitely. That's a wise decision. Or capitulate to capital, go through a period of capitalist appeasement, accept that capitalism was going to come into your borders. About 40% of the economy at its peak was capitalist, right? 60% of it being state-owned. Allow capitalism into your borders, accept it will create a certain amount of inequality in the society, and do so with the awareness that there is a threat that capital can take over your governmental systems, and that capital can corrupt your governmental systems. And through that awareness, ensure that it doesn't. And then once systems of capital begin to collapse internally, as they naturally do, which is a very astute Marxist analysis, begin to take those enterprises over and fold them back into the state. And once all of the capitalist enterprises collapse and are gone, continue forward through the process of developing through socialism towards communism. That's the Chinese strategy. And more important, and the most important thing to remember through all of that is that the Chinese strategy is always to avoid war. Avoid war. Under all circumstances. There is no reason to engage in a war. It is better to capitulate. It is better to appease. It is better to allow a certain degree of your economy to be taken over by capital interests than it is to have bombing campaigns on your cities. And that is the legitimate choice that the Chinese were faced. And to pretend like that's not true is insanity. And what's crazy, and I'm really hitting this point, and I'm going to continue hitting this point over and over and over again because it doesn't seem like it sinks in. And I find that to be strange, odd, and unusual. I don't understand why it doesn't sink in, why it doesn't actually penetrate, and why it doesn't become just understood. And because to me, it's foundational. To me, it's point one, right? I have seen, there was a fellow whose video I watched very recently because one of my regular viewers said that I should watch it, and I should do like a proper response video to him because I think his name is Fellow Traveler. He did a really good breakdown of Dangism, a really well-articulated critique, and his entire critique was super well-researched. He laid it all out for you. Fellow Traveler did this. Go find his channel. He'll lay out Dangism. He'll lay out everything I've just said to you, with the exception of the legitimate and real threat of war. That his analysis, for whatever reason, just excluded war. The Vietnam War, the Laos War, the Cambodian War, the Korean War, wars that happened on China's borders because of the United States, just obliterated from the discourse like they didn't exist at all. Not part of the material analysis. I guess war is not a material event that affects people. War doesn't matter. Losing your husband, your wives, your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, your friends, your neighbors, your community members in napalm strikes and nuclear bombardments doesn't count, according to these Western Marxists, which I find to be astounding. I find that to be an astounding omission. Let alone the exclusion of World War II from their analysis. This is like criticizing modern-day Russia without acknowledging the existence of the Nazis, without acknowledging the existence of the invading Nazis that murdered 25 million people. It's shocking. It's shocking that people do this. And the reason why I'm pounding on this is that once you actually understand that war exists, it matters, it's fundamental to the discourse, then you can actually understand why China made the decisions that it did. And you can see that those decisions were not only rational, but also extremely prudent and extremely wise. That the Western Marxist position that says they're engaging in revisionism is a type of Marxist fundamentalism. What they are doing is they are reading Marx, and then they're looking at modern-day China, and they're saying, well, this doesn't match this, therefore. So what they're doing is they're taking their own imagined perspective of what communism should be based on these writings, and they are judging a living, breathing, revolutionary society that has gone through its own history through the lens of their own imagination, while simultaneously knowing nothing about the country they're actually critiquing. And I find that to be a type of fundamentalism, to say that it's revisionism that we acknowledge reality. Do you think Russia will follow China's strategy? I think that Russia is mainly just holding on for dear life at this point. Russia went through a period of capitalist appeasement. It was much deeper, though. China was wise enough to understand the mechanisms by which capitalism actually controls society, whereas Russia basically went whole hog. and really just opened up its borders, went through like a true neoliberal shock therapy, in the truest sense. Like, the 90s were a terrible time for Russia. And the neoliberal shock therapy that got put into Russia it was also done against the wishes of the populace. So there was a lot of betrayal that happened under Gorbachev and Yeltsin, and but now Russia and the reason why Russia was doing that, and the reason why the ruling class of Russia was doing that, was they were also following this line of appeasement. That for them, appeasement with Europe meant becoming integrated into the European systems, becoming integrated into the IMF, becoming integrated into the G20, becoming integrated into the G7, what was at one point the G8, because they were part of that, becoming integrated into NATO. That this was their vision for how the future of Russia was going to do, because they were following a very basic line of, if you can't beat them, join them. And losing 25 million citizens in World War II is not an insignificant event. Again, I find that Western Marxists eliminate war from their analysis. That what I always like to say is that the Soviets beat the Nazis, but fascism beat communism in Russia. And the Russian communism and the fervor and the zeal for communism in Russia fell to the wayside in favor of stability and peace. That they didn't want to become antagonistic to the West anymore. They didn't want to be an antagonistic force. They wanted to be friends. They wanted to make amends and make peace. They didn't want to lose 25 million people. They didn't want these wars. They didn't want any of that. And so when Putin comes to power, that's his goal. He comes to power believing that he is going to be the leader that sticks the landing. That it starts with Khrushchev. Khrushchev renounces Stalin, makes a speech that's basically total bullshit, but what it does do is it distances them from Stalin and what they call Stalinism. Brezhnev and Gorbachev, Yeltsin, their whole trajectory is integration and appeasement with the West, and Putin believes he's going to stick the landing. And he comes in, and there's this great photo series that I should try to find again. There's this great photo series where where Putin is meeting with the world leaders of the West, and he looks just happy as a clam. He looks pleased as punch that he's meeting all these people. And it's only through several decades, like he's been in power for like 30 years, like not 30 years, but like 20 years, like it's been decades. And I think he came to power in 2000, if I'm not mistaken. And it's through the process of interacting with the West and governing alongside the West that he comes to realize that this strategy will never work. They will never be able to integrate with the West. That capitalist appeasement is ultimately a non-winning strategy. Certainly the way the Russians have gone about it. And I think you're right. Like, Putin is an autocrat that controls the oligarchs. Look, my analysis of Putin is very simple. Putin is a Russian. And maybe you want to call him a nationalist, if you'd like, but Putin views himself as a Russian. Like, he doesn't really espouse an ideology. He doesn't really talk about ideologies or his own personal philosophies that often. Right? Because I think at the end of the day, he just views himself as a Russian trying to do what's right for Russia. And his pivot away from the West towards China and the global South is going to be talked about in history books. I think he's as important a leader as Stalin. And I don't think it's because he is actually a particularly great man. I just think that the way history worked out, although he's definitely shown an astuteness and a wisdom. He's won every military conflict he's had. He's made the right decisions. He's put Russia in a winning position every single time. So, and I don't think that's completely him. I think he's got a good crew around him. I think he's got good people. And I think he's also, he's not like the West. Like, Russians are not like the West, where Democrats need to shut out the Republicans. Like CH, you just said it. Like, I don't think Putin shuts the communists out. I think that he listens to the communists. And I think he's listening to everybody because he sees everybody as a Russian. He sees everybody as a Russian trying to do the best for what is to be done in a state of total turmoil. And I think he understands what the stakes are, right? Like, that's what's important. And so I don't think that he is like an imperialist or an autocrat or a fascist or a communist or any of these ists or anything. I think he's just a man who happens to be a Russian who happened to get this position. Former KGB agent, you know? When he retires, I'll be very interested to see how he writes about his life. That'll be very telling, I think, when he writes his biography and when we see that kind of stuff. And then who his successor is going to be very, very interesting to see. So Mark writes, Russia tried to appease, but ultimately the West rejected them. I think that's correct. The USA sees Russia as mortal enemies and Europe has capitulated to the USA. Yeah, and it's stupidity. It's just stupidity of the highest order. That it would have been perfectly possible for Russia to integrate itself into Europe. The threat from the USA, because the US is so fragile and so unsure of itself, and so there's a good word for this that it projects a lot of power, but it's actually quite weak. Because Americans are quite pathetic, frankly. Like their whole system is quite pathetic. There's a lot of like fragility in the consciousness of America. And so when they see Europe getting on with Russia, all they see is a threat. All they see is Europe being pulled away from us. And then they'll become friends with Russia, and then we'll lose an ally in the world, right? As opposed to just like, look, everybody can talk to one another. Like we're not monogamous here. Like we're not married, you know? And so I think that that's ultimately what makes America act the way that it's acting in the world, and puts wedges between Europe and Russia, and starts to fund the war in Ukraine, and starts to fund neo-Nazi movements there, and starts to really fund a propaganda system in order to encourage Nazism throughout Ukraine, to make sure that a wedge is drawn between the West and between Europe and Russia, so that they can never become proper friends and proper allies and have proper trade. And I think it's a huge mistake. Like, I think it's a huge, 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 huge mistake from the United States. I think it's a big reason why they're losing a lot of prestige and they're losing a lot of friends in the world, because the mask is off now. These guys are Nazis. Right, the mask is completely off. There's no pretending anymore, right? Like maybe for a period of time we could buy into this idea that like, we're just out there in the world trying our best, and it's a complicated place, the world, and we're trying to do our best to make sure we spread this liberal democracy and make sure everybody lives in freedom. Well, nobody believes that anymore, and the only people who believe that are the Nazis themselves, right? They believe that everybody would be better if they were white. And it's mask off, and it's open, and it's real, and you've got people like Ben Shapiro, like Jordan Peterson, like Stephen Bonnell, who are mask off Nazis now, and we should call them that, and we should defend that position, because they are defending genocide, they are talking like Nazis, they are defending Nazi positions. And the more and more you actually look into their ideology and look into their belief systems, the more you see very plainly that it is basically black and white Nazism, what they're espousing, right? So, well, Mark, thanks for popping in. Off to read some bedtime communist literature to my son. Glad to hear that, my man. That's what we need for the next generation, right? There's not going to be that many of them. Right, so it's good to know that people are trying to educate the next generation, right? Because they're going to be a much smaller cohort, and so they're going to need to be like real buckle down and figure it out. Yeah, Putin's biggest mistakes are trusting the West and Ukraine at all, but you can't really fault him for that. You can't really fault Putin for that. I think it wasn't until Libya happened in 2006 that you can really see Putin even turning away from the West. Like, his speeches that he made about Libya, I should find those speeches again, and I should show them on the stream, because he was scathing. He was scathing. He didn't hold back. Okay, back to this article. Again, we're talking about the housing market collapsing in China, what the Chinese are doing in it. Oh, sorry, Bread Bunny, am I ignoring you? Bread Bunny, I think I have a correction to offer. One of your examples for capitalists being explicitly pro-Nazi is Hitler being Times Man of the Year, but not Stalin. It seems Stalin was Man of the Year twice. Hitler was once. Hold on. Was he? Well, I'll take that correction. Stalin Times Man of the Year. So he was. Look at that. How did I not know this? Yeah, go away. No kidding. Look at that. I'm learning something. That's nice. And Hitler Times Man of the Year. I like this. I like this. The articles that came up when I put Stalin in were just like, yeah, here it is. Time Person of the Year. Yeah, on the day. Yeah, here's the story, right? Like, Stalin was Man of the Year twice, right? Because Stalin's great. We all love Stalin. Why was Hitler Man's Times of the Year? 130 years after his birth, he continues to live as a symbol of evil. As it should be. As it should be. Crunchy asparagus bouillon. Hello, my friend. Yes, the beard. I've trimmed it up too, so it looks great. Here, I'll give you guys the full Monty. The full, glorious. This is after a trim too. It was actually longer. It was actually down to here. Well, I'm glad you like it. I hope that you're a beautiful woman. But if not, I'm sure you're a handsome man as well. All right, thank you so much for that, Bread Bunny. I appreciate that correction, because I don't want to say things that are false. So, correction noted. Glad to see that Stalin did get his due in Time Magazine. Glad to see that when Time Magazine talks about their putting up Man of the Year as Hitler, they've got to be like, so, we got some explaining to do. But when they do it to Stalin, they're like, yeah, Stalin, he was a baller. Here's how Stalin was a baller. Everybody knows he's a baller. We don't need to defend this. Stalin was awesome. So thank you, Bread Bunny. I appreciate that. You know what? It's one of the things that I'm really, really glad that I do, and I'm really glad that I'm like this, is if somebody wants to give me a correction on something that I've said, or somebody wants to check me, or somebody wants to come into that kind of thing, and they can do it, they can show me that I'm incorrect or giving incorrect information, I just accept it. I'm so happy that I do that. I just say, yep, I'm a human being. I make mistakes. I don't know everything there is to know. So thank you so much, Bread Bunny. I appreciate that. I'm sure I'll get you in my nightmares or something. I don't know, some weird thing. No, blessings to you in your house, Bread Bunny. Blessings to you in your house. All right. Back to this article. Yeah, the cost would be huge, potentially up to $280 billion a year, so not big at all, right? $280 billion a year is not a lot of money, right? It sounds like a lot of money, but it's not. If you're a nation like China, you're good. Or a total of around $1.4 trillion, according to our analysis. So like 2 years of United States military spending. Whether China wants to pay that tab, or even can, is a central question. No, it's not. They obviously can. Like, what are you talking about? $280 billion? China has a massive economy, right? It's on par, at least, with the United States. Maybe it's slightly below, maybe it's slightly above. Depends on your perspective. It doesn't matter. The fact that you're even having the conversation means that they've got the money. This whole, how you gonna pay for it thing is so fucking bonkers to me. It's the wildest shit that Westerners do, right? Literally, you're sending satellites into space. You've got people walking on the moon. You've got enormous military infrastructure projects. You've got aircraft carriers that can hold other aircraft carriers. And you're sitting there being like, building some houses? How you gonna pay for that? Like, do it. Shut up. What are you talking about? It's so embarrassing to watch these guys do this shit. Local governments in China are already burdened with colossal debt because it's the number that matters, not the infrastructure that you build, right? The infrastructure that you build and the society that you build and the systems that you build and the institutions that you build are irrelevant. The fake number that's on a screen somewhere to kind of track what's going on and what is getting built and all that kind of stuff, the fake number on the screen is what matters. That's what matters, right? If you're a Western capitalist, that's true. You worship money and you don't care about the success of your society at all. In fact, the ideology states that you should destroy your society in order to get more fake numbers on the screen. And it's unclear whether Beijing will be willing to bear the brunt of the funding burden. Yeah, you know what they do historically? You know what they have done several times? They do it all the time in foreign trade. They literally just write off the debt. They're just like, oh, there's a debt? Meh. Right? Why don't they do that with their local governments? Because they're not doing austerity. Right? They're not performing austerity because austerity is a failed fascist policy that doesn't work. Why would they do austerity on their public? They literally are just like, you know how they view debt? They literally look at the number and they go, that's the amount of investment that we've put into this area. We see this number is higher than this number over here. This section of the Chinese economy has only gotten this much investment, what you call debt, right? So we're going to put more investment into this area to shore that number up. And then they'll just keep raising, because guess what? They're all fake. They're all just tracking numbers, right? They're not accumulation of wealth and power so you can have Jeffrey Epstein pedophile island, right? They're just tracking numbers. And that's how the Chinese view it. And so when it's like, oh no, the number went up slightly, it's like, yeah, the number's supposed to go up slightly. The number's supposed to go up over time. Right? The number's supposed to go up over time. Oh, Crunchy, if you stick around until I'm done this article, I'll go through the Ukraine conflict. I talk about the Ukraine conflict all the time, okay? But I definitely want to stick on this article, okay? Is Russia bad, Putin a devil? No. And like the too long didn't read is that the United States funded neo-Nazis, and you could just Google Donbass war and read the Wikipedia article. It is like CIA propaganda, so they'll use like Russian separatists and all this kind of stuff. But like there was a war in the Donbass where the United States funded Nazis. Like, yeah, it's going to draw Russia into the conflict. Beijing has repeatedly disappointed analysts and investors over the past couple of years. So let me rephrase this. Beijing has repeatedly disappointed parasitical psychopathic capitalists who care about money worship over the past couple of years with insufficient or poorly executed measures to stimulate growth, i.e. extract dollars from workers, and clean up the housing mess, right? How do we continue extracting more wealth from the underclass? So that's phrased in a different way here, but that's what they're saying. People who have examined some of the government's plans say the strategy is also filled with complexities and contradictory aims that could make it difficult to fully implement successfully. Will they talk about it? We'll find out. 9/11, why did it happen? Oh man, you're asking like big questions, dude. No. I want to read this article. This is an important article. This is from the Wall Street Journal. This is them talking about China, and it's good to dissect this stuff and to analyze it. New model. Yeah, a new model, one that works. And funnily enough, the new model is the same as the old model. It's just, actually happening. Like Americans can't get it into their heads that like Chinese actually plan over time. Like wait a minute, they actually had a plan and they're doing the plan? What? A December confab presided over by Xi made it clear that a priority for 2024 is to speed up development of what authorities call a new model for the real estate sector. The model should focus heavily on state-provided affordable housing, according to the official account of the meeting. Initial plans call for adding 6 million affordable housing units to the coming 5 years, the government documents show. So the new model is the old model. The People's Bank of China has set aside 500 billion won, or roughly $70 billion, in low-cost financing to policy banks to help get the strategy rolling. A handful of projects funded with that money are underway. And this will totally work, right? Like, why wouldn't this work? The State Council Information Office, which handles inquiries for China's leadership, didn't respond to questions. Yeah, because your questions are always going to be dumb. Right? Like, they're always going to be dumb Western bullshit. They don't have time to teach you a history lesson, right? Like, they're not going to... And also, like, they don't really want to tell you what their prevailing strategy is. They don't really want to open themselves up to be vulnerable to Western intelligence. Like, they don't really want to open themselves up and reveal their strategy to you. Right? They want to keep that a little bit close to the chest. Like, it's bad enough that Deng was as... although they might as... Like, that's what's so funny. Is that, like, it's all right in front of you. You can read it, and you can see it, right? They have been pretty upfront about it, but you got to actually read their history and know something about their history, right? And so you're not going to do that. The Wall Street Journal is not going to do that, right? This is the best they've got, by the way. This is the Wall Street Journal, and they're not going to do that. They don't know who Deng is. They're not going to read about Dengism, right? Crunchy Asparagus... if you go to the description of the Twitch, it'll take you to a YouTube channel. This is the YouTube channel. If you want to be in that chat, you come to YouTube, and then you'll be in that chat. Xi is adamant that real estate, which for years propelled China's growth and at one point made up about a quarter of gross domestic product, should no longer take on such an outsized role in the economy, the policy advisors say. In Xi's view, too much credit moved into property speculation, adding risks to the financial system, widening the gap between the haves and the have-nots, and diverting resources from what Xi considers to be the real economy, sectors such as manufacturing and high-end technology that he sees as crucial for China in its competition with the United States. Sounds familiar? Sounds logical and rational, right? Like, oh, hey, maybe we should get rid of housing speculators. Maybe we should get rid of this fake economy, this false economy of just trading houses to pretend like GDP growth is up. Oh, man, our GDP growth is up. Me and my buddy swapped houses 5,000 times. That really ramped up GDP growth. Yeah, we're doing great. In some ways, Xi's plan would take China's housing market back to its roots. Here we go. Are they actually going to read a book? Decades ago, in the Mao Zedong era, so we're going back to Mao now, the party controlled the market with most Chinese people living in homes provided by their party work units. In the late 1990s, when leaders started liberalizing the markets, they initially envisioned a two-tier system in which some people would buy privately developed properties while others would live in state-subsidized housing. Over the following decades, however, private developers like China Evergrande expanded rapidly and increasingly dominated the market. Yep, right, they monopolized the market. If you have a market, one group will eventually monopolize that market. And what's so great is that they talk about this like China didn't know. Like, that's the best. Like, they talk about it like China was, like, caught off guard. And like, oh my goodness. Like, no, they knew. When they see a monopoly form, they go, that's the monopoly that we expected to see, because it's predictable, right? They predict that there's going to be a market a monopoly that shows up in a market, and then when the monopoly shows up in the market, they go, that's the monopoly. And then they deal with the monopoly, and when the monopoly starts to collapse and degrade, they take over the monopoly, as they said they would. Today, more than 90% of Chinese households own their home, compared with around 66% in the United States. The shift to private ownership created enormous wealth in China, but the market's explosive growth also sparked a debt-fueled bubble. Sounds familiar? Priced many young families out of desirable housing. Sound familiar? And dismayed Xi and other senior leaders who felt the country was straying too far from its socialist roots. With the market plunging into turmoil last year following a years-long government campaign to rein in excess property investment, economists inside and outside China called on Beijing to take more assertive steps to restructure the sector. Sounds familiar? The difference is that China's actually doing it. Right? China's actually doing it. There are now millions of empty units across China and many buildings in need of financial support. In internal policy discussions, Vice Premier He, one of Xi's most trusted lieutenants, argued that getting the state more involved would be a way for the government to absorb excess home supply, put a floor under falling prices, and help protect banks from having to write down hundreds of billions of dollars of property loans if the market kept getting worse. Another selling point, according to the advisors, by converting more private properties to state-subsidized housing for rent or sale, it could help advance Xi's oft-repeated common prosperity goal of making Chinese society more equal. Crunchy, are you just confessing that I've banned you in the past? Is that what I saw right here? Have I banned you in the past? Document 14. The new strategy started coming into sharper focus with a central government directive issued in October, dubbed Document 14. It called for adding some 6 million affordable housing units in 35 cities with more than 3 million people each over the next 5 years. The document disclosed few details on how to implement the plan, but it specified that the government would place restrictions on who can buy any units that are offered for sale. Wow, putting restrictions? Here I am. I own 50,000 houses. I'd like to own 60,000 houses. Free market. This is normal. I'll just jack the rent up. No, maybe not. Maybe not, right? And would forbid those units from being traded on the open market. Wow, big shocker. Like, all of this sounds perfectly reasonable, right? Like, the capitalists are failing, and it's causing harm in the society, and they're implementing a strategy in order to stabilize things and get this market out of the hands of these capitalists, right? The PBOC, China's central bank, has since allocated 70% of the roughly $70 billion it is making available to 3 policy banks, China Development Bank, Export-Import Bank of China, and Agricultural Development Bank of China, PBO disclosures show. China Development Bank disclosed on December 19th that it had granted a line of credit totaling 202 million won to the city of Fuzhou to build an affordable housing project. Upon its completion, expected in 2026, the project will have some 701 housing units, which the local government plans to sell to modest-income families at discounted prices. Wow, can you imagine if our government did something like that? In 2 years, China's going to build 701 housing units in this city. You think we're building that many? You think that's going to happen here in the West? Probably not. The bank also extended a 10 million won loan to a government of Hunan, a province south of the Yangtze River, to develop government housing in a rundown inner-city district, according to information from the Hunan government. It's unclear how much of those funds would be used to develop new projects or to purchase and repurpose existing properties from commercial developers. The bank and Hunan's government didn't respond to request for comment. In early January, the central bank and the government's top financial regulatory body, the National Administration of Financial Regulation, followed up with new guidelines pledging unspecified financial support to government-subsidized rentals. The guidelines said state funding would help revitalize existing housing stock. Vice Premier He laid out some of the government's plan to U.S. business representatives, including Wall Street executives, when he visited San Francisco last November with Xi. During the meeting on the sidelines of Xi's summit with President Biden, he focused on the government-subsidized housing plan, telling the American executives it will help people in big cities afford housing, according to people familiar with the matter. Like, they're literally telling America about it. Like, they're literally going to America and being like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this thing. You should do it. Oh, you're not doing it. Oh, is it because you're psychopaths? Oh, sorry, China would never say that because China is way more diplomatic than I am. The discussions suggest that Chinese leaders are concerned about how foreign investors view the government's response to the housing problem and how they have been selling off Chinese equities and bonds in recent months, some people have said. Who are these some people? We don't know. Also, yeah, I think China is constantly in a position of trying to ease the mind of these psychos, right? Like, what have I said previously in the past about China, right? China is constantly trying to appease this monster. It's constant, like, sure, yeah, we're doing some stuff. Like, the state is going to come in and take care of the housing market, but that doesn't mean we're crazy. That doesn't make us a bunch of kooky commies. Please don't come over here and bomb us, right? Everything's totally fine. Everything's totally fine, right, America? Ha 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 ha. We're all friends here, right? Please don't kill us like you have in the past, in recent memory. But he didn't have anything to say on steps that many foreign bankers and investors have urged, such as I love this, man. This is the best. Oh, this is so good. So literally, we just read a bunch of very material, real things that the Chinese government is doing and can do in order to help its own citizens. But what the West is concerned about is restructuring cash-strained private developers, or completing construction of millions of homes people in China already paid for but never received because their developers ran into financial trouble. His half-hour-long monologue failed to impress, the people say. Yeah, because what they care about is money for themselves. That's what it comes down to. That you can lay out how your plan is going to benefit your citizens, how it's going to improve the quality of life for everybody, but if it doesn't put money in my pocket, I don't give a fuck. Right? That's basically what they're saying here. They're just confessing. Like, yeah, put millions of people in the streets. Do I get a dollar? To the International Monetary Fund and some other economists, who these are, we don't know, Beijing's most urgent task is to come up with a comprehensive plan to assist financially distressed developers with debt restructuring. So bail out the banks, bail out the developers. Thankfully, the Chinese government has explicitly said they're not going to do that, because why would you continue funneling resources into a dead system, right? Like, we all know what that means. It means take wealth from your society and just put it into a developer's pocket while they continue to fail, right? That's what that actually means. To get banks and other stakeholders to take losses, moves that, while painful, would restore public confidence in the market. Now, of course, when they say public confidence, they mean white people. They mean the West. They don't mean Chinese confidence. They mean Bill Gates. That's public confidence. Beijing remains reluctant to offer direct liquidity support to developers, however, because officials are worried about re-inflating the housing bubble that Xi is bent on deflating. Policy advisors involved in discussion said, yeah, they don't want to give failures money to continue their failures. Why would we continue the failure? Like, this policy has failed. It doesn't work. We're not going to do it. You can see it in the United States that we actually made it fail. Like, we threw a ton of money. We threw a ton of money into our housing market, right? Bailed out the banks. You all remember this. Quantitative easing. You all remember this, right? And it failed. It completely failed. Why would China follow suit? Buying properties and converting them into rental units raises many complexities, including whether the government should pay current market values. In effect, bailing out developers or individual homeowners who can't make debt payments, or insist on steep discounts. It's also unclear what would happen if owners don't want to sell. Yeah, I'm sure they're going to work through all of that. Like, again, they're saying these things as if China's unaware. New construction for affordable housing is more straightforward. Economists note. Who these economists are, we don't know. Like, this literally could be Fraser Institute bullshit, right? And would have the added benefit of propping up China's construction industry. But expanding new construction would also add more supply at a time when China's population is shrinking. Yeah, everybody's population is shrinking, dude. We're in a major population decline here. China's just done their population decline on purpose, right? Like, they went through the one-child policy. Like, I love this. I love it when people talk about this as if they're just like, oh, China's population is shrinking. Yeah, they did it on purpose. They were looking at a population crisis or a concern, and they decided to do something about it. Whereas we shrink our populaces just by having shitty societies, right? When it comes to population shrinking, we know how to do it right. Make everybody miserable. The IMF expects fundamental demand for new housing to drop by almost 50% over the next decade. Some Chinese officials have argued that the country's economic downturn could provide an opportunity for the government to swoop in to buy more properties at a lower cost, making it easier to give priority to conversions of existing properties. See, look at that. They're thinking about this. They're thinking about the future. Wow. Wealth distribution. Michael Pettis, a finance professor at Peking University. Hey, there's a name. It isn't some economists. It's a guy that you can look at and maybe learn something about. Says that if the government does significantly improve affordable housing, it will represent the kind of transfer to the poor households that China urgently needs. Yeah, here in America, we do upward distribution of wealth, right? Over the COVID period, the wealthy extracted $3 trillion out of us, right? That wealth just went straight upwards. Right? They're not doing that in China? Oh, something's wrong with them. Freeing people to spend more on other things. But he said it was too early to know how it would pan out. Ziwu Chen, a finance professor at the University of Hong Kong, was more skeptical. Oh yeah, University of Hong Kong, right? So he was trained by British. He was trained by British capital because the transfer of Hong Kong back to China happened like 2 days ago. So this guy was trained by British economists, so he's an idiot, right? Like, if you're a British economist, you're pretty uneducated. Like, you don't actually know anything about economics. He compared China's new housing strategy to the way Beijing uses its so-called national team of state funds to buy equities to try to prop up the depressed stock market. Such efforts have often failed to substantially bolster the market. Using government money to buy up distressed real estate would be no different, he said, given the country's demographic challenges and supply gut. Except houses are real, right? There's the flaw in this guy's analysis. Just like all Western capitalists, right? Houses are real. They're a thing that exists in the world. They're a tangible asset that sits there and lives there and is there. You can interact with it. It's in a place. It has coordinates. You can find it, right? It isn't ethereal, right? It isn't like a stock or a bond, right? It isn't measured by some like mathematical formula. It's an object in the world, right? That's why these Western capitalists are so fraudulent, because they don't know the difference between reality and fakeness. Everything's fake to them. Everything's just numbers on a screen, flow chart, right? They have no conceptualization in their brain that things exist in the world and that they are real. And so if you don't think that way, then yeah, everything is just ethereal nonsense, right? But the second you understand that there's a difference between a piece of paper that some president signed 15 years ago that says you're owed a certain amount of value in some kind of a liquidity market somewhere off on the corner, that's different than a house that is in a place. Like, as soon as you understand that distinction, you're like, oh yeah, this house actually matters more than this weird little piece of paper. Because in 500 years, that house will still be there. Maybe it will have gone through a transition and like maybe it'll do this, that, or the other thing, but the house will still be there, right? Your little piece of paper or whatever, you'll have cashed that in or changed that or exchanged that or something, and then it'll just disappear and nobody will give a fuck, right? Like it's just amazing to watch these guys. Government interventions could also raise uncomfortable questions about social fairness, he said. Oh, social fairness. Now Western capitalists are really concerned about social fairness. Buying properties from existing homeowners or developers when the market is weak could amount to using national resources to subsidize owners who have the flexibility to sell when others don't, he said. I don't get to sell my property for $100 million. Get fucked. Just get totally fucked, right? These guys are such parasites. They're such vampiric parasites, man. It turns into an issue of wealth distribution, he said. Not everyone in China owns multiple apartments, nor are they ready to sell. And, like, again, this is just like them doing that classic thing of like, oh, you're critiquing the existence of a landlord that owns 500,000 properties? Why do you want grandmothers to not be able to rent out their basements? Like, it's the exact same logical stream. It's like why these guys are so fraudulent. They just argue in bad faith. They're stupid. They don't know anything, right? And they're professors. Like, it's amazing to watch these guys. Past efforts to support or re-engineer the market with government supports have met with mixed results. Over the past couple of years, a few Chinese cities, including Zhengzhou in central China and Suzhou near Shanghai, have implemented their own programs to buy a few thousand unsold properties from developers and then convert them into affordable housing for low-income families, including farmers displaced by urban development. According to analysis from China Real Estate Information Corps, the cities intended to buy from state-backed developers, or those controlled by local governments, typically at below-market prices. These programs, economists say, helped absorb excess housing, but also further strained local finances, because that's what we care about, the fake number on the screen. Attempts to reach the cities for comment were unsuccessful. Yeah, they don't give a fuck what you think, Wall Street Journal. They don't need your insight, right? Another notable previous push for social housing was a slum clearance initiative launched nearly a decade ago, when China's property market was last in distress. Under that program, the central bank provided low-cost funds to state-owned banks, which then made loans to developers to purchase land from cities and townships and then build more housing units. Those local governments, in turn, doled out cash subsidies to families dislocated from slum clearance efforts so they could purchase the new units on the open market. The initiative helped restore demand for real estate but led to more construction, worsening China's housing glut. China can't win, eh? Build more housing, that's bad. Develop more housing, that's bad. Why? Because it's not making some weird capitalist rich. Today, the housing crisis is much more severe than the last downturn, economists say. Yeah, we can't extract wealth from the society anymore, leaving the government with an even bigger challenge to clear up the mess. Right? I just read an article that fundamentally said China has a strategy to deal with its housing crisis that's going to work 100%, but it's not going to make capitalists super rich, so it's going to fail. This is a religious ideology. This is for real. Like, I mean, is anybody... I really wish that I still had that article. It was so good. I feel like I might just search it, because it was such a good article, and it was so prescient. I can't believe that I don't have it. I was so looking forward to reading it, too. I might actually see if I can just, like, search it up quickly. Angus. I was like, dang. This is it. But this isn't the article. He had an article. What was the name of it? Rethinking My Economics. Thank you. Yes. Yes. This article, I think, is actually an extremely prescient and powerful article. Thanks, Martin. I was going to say something about their slum glut, but that sounded dirty. Trump on Twitch. We've got a fella. Trump, we need so bad. 2024. I think you're going to be disappointed, my friend. I'm going to let you know. Have you ever listened to Tom McDonald music? It's ringing a bell, but I can't. Nothing's jumping to my mind right away, bud. Have you ever watched China Uncensored? I've seen a little bit of China Uncensored. I don't think they're a very serious channel. Resist writes, whatever is the point of a market unless it makes somebody rich? Of course. Right? And to be clear, Trump, the reason why I don't really take China Uncensored very seriously is because they have the same perspective that I'm critiquing, which is that they seem to think that dollars and money on screens matters more than people living in houses, right? That like material reality matters more than finance capital. And if you don't have that perspective, if you think that finance capital is the goal, if you hold that as a religious ideology, as Western capitalists do, then you're going to come up with all kinds of stupid excuses. You're going to come up with all kinds of stupid reasons to hold back your society. This article right here. Oh, I didn't even know that, June. Thank you. So, Trump, I think that you should know this, okay? One of my regulars in the chat here, June. Thank you so much, June. I appreciate this. Newly converted cannibal, June. She is pointing out China Uncensored is Falun Gong. Now, why is that important? Okay, so Falun Gong was is, I should say, a religious cult that came out of China in the 90s. Here's their symbol. This is their actual real symbol that they actually have. They still have it. It's what they have, right? They are a racial purity cult that was thrown out of China for being a racial purity cult. That the Chinese didn't want Nazis in their borders, and so they got rid of them. The leader of the cult, proponents of the cult, believe that he can turn invisible and fly. You can read all about him in the Falun Gong thing here. I've done a video on Falun Gong years ago. Falun Gong also, if you see any Shen Yun posters around, which is, I don't know why they're not showing me the images. Yeah, there you go. Which is this. If you see any of these posters around, this is them. They are a racial purity cult that was thrown out of China, that is now extremely anti-Chinese and anti-communism, obviously, and anti-Chinese government, that creates a fake version. Like, you want to talk about revisionism, these guys are revisionist. These guys create a fake history that essentially glorifies the Chinese monarchies, Western imperialism generally. My favorite part, because I went and saw this show, my favorite part of the Shen Yun show was they had a projector screen up where people were like dancing in front of it. And at one point, a big gigantic tidal wave comes to wipe out their city. And on the tidal wave, the face of Karl Marx appears with the hammer and sickle emblazed on his forehead, his eyes burning bright red. And then the god of Shen Yun shows up and banishes him and chases him away. And I was like, bit on the nose. Bit on the nose there. So, China Uncensored, yeah, if they're part of Falun Gong, then they're a racial purity cult on the same level as like the Nazis, disgraced and thrown out of their home country. And of course they took root here in the West because we fucking love Nazis. I actually have a great article. Dude. SS veteran in Parliament scandal receives award named after Nazi collaborator. For those of you who have been following the channel, you know all about this guy, right? Turns out, Dr. Strange the Legend. Have you ever watched Salty Cracker? He's an ex-leftist. No, I've never seen this guy. And kind of with a name like that, it's sort of an odd name, frankly. Yaroslav Hunka, the Waffen SS veteran honored by the Canadian Parliament as a hero last September, was recently awarded a medal named after a Ukrainian Nazi collaborator. So, to be clear, this happened after he was honored in Parliament. Okay? The award was presented by a regional official who is a member of a modern-day far-right political party in Ukraine. The Yaroslav Stetsko Medal, whose official title can be translated to the Honorary Award of the Ternopil Regional Council for Services to the Ternopil Region, was presented by Ole Sirotyuk to Hunka's great-niece, Olga Vitkovska, on March 19th, Hunka's 99th birthday. Happy birthday, Hunka. Boy, you've given us such a great amount of insight into the nature of our society. Thanks. Hunka's commendation was brought to attention by Ukrainian-Canadian political scientist and University of Ottawa professor Ivan Kachanovsky. Ukrainian state broadcaster Suspilini Noviny reported that the ceremony took place in the western Ukrainian city of Ternopil, and that the regional council approved the award on February 6th. According to Kachanovsky, Sirotyuk is head of the Ternopil Regional Council's Standing Commission on Legal Affairs and the former governor of the Ternopil Oblast. He's also the local leader of the far-right Svoboda Party. The Svoboda Party has its roots in Ukraine's neo-Nazi movement and venerates wartime Nazi collaborators like Stetsko. Originally from Ternopil, Stetsko was a virulently anti-Semitic Ukrainian ultranationalist who, along with Stepan Bandera, was one of the leaders of the militant and collaborationalist Bandera faction of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists. Bandera's faction supported the creation of the Ukrainian national government on June 22, 1941, the day Nazi forces began their invasion of the Soviet Union, unleashing the first phase of the Holocaust in the region. It was Stetsko who announced the creation of a collaborationist Ukrainian state in Lviv 8 days later. Stetsko was the ideologue of the OUNB and self-proclaimed prime minister of their aborted June 30th, 1941 state, said Per Anders Rudling, a historian at Lund University and an expert on nationalism and ideological history in the post-Soviet successor states and their overseas diasporas. He was one of the most radical of the OUNB activists, endorsing the extermination of Jews and eugenic engineering, among other things. He dabbles. Rudling detailed Stetsko's fervent anti-Semitism and thoughts on eugenics in the context of the radical Ukrainian nationalist tradition in a 2019 article in the journal Science in Context. Kachanovsky told the Maple that the Stetsko Medal is, regionally speaking, akin to receiving an award from the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. I want to read that one again. Boy, do I want to read that one again, dude. That one hit me. That was just like I'm being very flippant right now, but that actually hit me right in my heart. Kachanovsky told the Maple that the Stetsko Medal, Nazi medal, is regionally speaking akin to receiving an award from the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. There's no Nazis in Ukraine, you guys. No Nazis in Ukraine. The medal was awarded for Hunka's significant personal contribution to the provision of assistance to the armed forces of Ukraine, active charity, and public activity. State broadcaster Suspilny Noviny indicated Hunka was concerned he would be extradited after the scandal in Parliament last fall and fled to an undisclosed location in Latin America in late 2013. He has since returned to Canada, according to the report. Oh, looks like we aren't extraditing him, which we should definitely do. Scandal reverberates. After Hunka received a standing ovation in Parliament during Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky's visit to Ottawa, journalists discovered Hunka's fond online recollections of his time volunteering for the 14th Waffen-SS Galicia Division. The episode prompted widespread outrage, as well as commentaries defending those who volunteered to fight with the SS Division during the Second World War. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau initially denied having any knowledge of Hunka or his invitation to Parliament, and Anthony Rota took responsibility for the incident by resigning from his position as House Speaker. But new reports this year revealed that Trudeau invited Hunka to attend a Zelensky rally in Toronto, an invitation made at the request of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress. The UCC has long been alleged to represent Ukrainian ultranationalists, a political section that includes devotees of wartime Nazi collaborators, like Stetsko and Bandera. According to Kachanovsky, Stetsko stated his Ukrainian government would closely cooperate with the Nazis, including in the elimination of the local Jewish population. In his act of restoration of the Ukrainian state, Stetsko vowed to work closely with the National Socialist Greater Germany under the leadership of Adolf Hitler. 42 years later, in 1983, the year I was born, this is nice, Stetsko, by then leader of the anti-Bolshevik Bloc of Nations, was warmly received by the White House by then U.S. President Ronald Reagan as the last premier of a free Ukrainian state. God, we just love Nazis, man. We just love them. Stetsko expressed his support for Nazi methods of exterminating Jewry to the Germans in July of 1941, said Kachanovsky. I gotta tell you, if you're using the word Jewry, I just think you're in a bad spot. I think that's just not a good thing to be doing. This occurred after the Bandera faction of the OUN and other OUN-led militias organized large-scale pogroms in Lviv and many other locations in western Ukraine. Several thousand Jews were massacred by Ukrainian ultranationalists during the Lviv pogrom of 1941. Lev Golinkin reported for The Forward in 2021 that Stetsko and Bandera, along with other Nazi collaborators and SS volunteers, continue to be well commemorated throughout western Ukraine. But there's no Nazis in Ukraine. There are many monuments and streets named after Nazi collaborators from the OUN and the UPA, Ukrainian Insurgent Army, and the SS Galician Division in the Ternopil region, said Kachanovsky. The OUN, UPA, and SS Galicia were all directly complicit in war crimes during the Second World War, including the Holocaust. They were also responsible for the mass murder and ethnic cleansing of as many as 100,000 Poles, as well as Jews, Russians, Belarusians, and other Ukrainians, and other minority groups in the region. The Galicia Division, Hunka's old unit, was controversially determined not to be responsible for war crimes. But hold on. The Galicia Division, Hunka's old unit, was controversially determined to not be responsible for war crimes by Canadian Justice Jules Deschênes when he was tasked by the Mulroney government in the 1980s to investigate allegations that war criminals were living in Canada. Fuck you. Deschênes' decision opposed established international criminal precedent dating back to the post-war Nuremberg trials, which had determined that the entirety of the SS to be a criminal organization that was collectively responsible for the Holocaust. The exact number of SS veterans, Nazi collaborators, and other assorted fascists accused of war crimes who found refuge in Canada after the Second World War, still unknown, as much of the Deschênes Commission's final report remains secret. Maybe we should know who these Nazis are. Maybe we should know who these Nazis are. And of course, it's important for us to understand, okay? The liberals here in Canada and the United States are trying to pretend like there's no Nazi problem in Ukraine. But every single time we poll Ukrainians, seems pretty Nazi. Here's an article from the New Statesman by Ido Vok. Ukraine's problematic nationalist heroes. Kiev's lionization of 20th century nationalists linked to atrocities is alienating allies and playing into Russian propaganda. I love it. Just stating what is true is now Russian propaganda, right? Berlin. One of Ukraine's longest-standing disputes with its allies have nothing to do with the war. The current one, at least. The country's glorification of historical figures who fought for an independent Ukraine in early 20th century continues to be a source of contention, not only with neighboring Poland, but Germany and Israel, due to such figures' links to mass atrocities. On the 1st of January, Ukrainian institutions, including the parliament, commemorated on the 1st of January. Ukrainian institutions, including the parliament, commemorated the birth of Stepan Bandera. No Nazis in Ukraine, though. A Second World War-era Ukrainian nationalist Nazi. The official parliamentary Twitter account shared a photo of Zelery Zaluzhny, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, under a portrait of Bandera. The caption directly linked the present war to Bandera's fight against the Soviet Union. The complete and final victory of Ukrainian nationalism will come when the Russian Empire ceases to exist. No Nazism here. Bandera was the leader of a branch of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists which collaborated with the Nazis during the German occupation of Western Ukraine. Although Bandera himself was imprisoned in Germany for much of the war, his followers found the parliamentary Ukrainian Insurgent Army, under the leadership of the OUNB, which was responsible for the massacre of up to 100,000 Poles and tens of thousands of Jews during the war. The OUNB primarily fought the Soviet Union, although later, in the war, it also opposed the Nazis after they cooled on the idea of an independent Ukraine. I love these losers, right? Like, they looked at the Nazis and said, yeah, we'll be buddies. And then when the Nazis turned on them, they were like, what? Surely the leopards will not eat my face. And like, hey guys, do you think that like the second largest cohort that fought with the Soviets in World War II were Ukrainians? Do you think maybe you're on the wrong side of this thing? In response to the New Year's tweet, Ukraine's close ally Poland, which views Bandera as a perpetrator of mass violence against ethnic Poles, issued a rare rebuke to Kiev. Tues, this is a disaster. Tues Morawiecki, the Polish prime minister, told reporters that Poland takes an extremely critical stance towards any glorification or even remembrance of Bandera, whom he accused of genocide. Israel and Germany also having criticized Ukrainian government figures who have spoken in favor of Bandera, such as Andriy Melnik, the former ambassador to Germany, no Nazis in Ukraine, who said in an interview with German television last year that Bandera was not a mass murderer, even though he's like literally covered in blood. The glorification of Bandera is part of a growing trend in Ukraine to rehabilitate historical figures connected with the fight for Ukrainian independence, even those who are associated with atrocities and the fucking Nazis. A recent call by the Ukrainian National Writers Union to close the Kiev Museum dedicated to Mikhail Bulgakov, the Soviet author of The Master and Margarita. Really? The Master and Margarita. Take me away to Margaritaville. Cites the writer's smearing of Simon Petliura, leader of the short-lived Ukrainian People's Republic, that declared its independence from the Russian Empire in 1917, and then resisted the Bolsheviks until 1920, part of the wider Russian Civil War at the time. Petliura is today celebrated by many Ukrainians as a nationalist hero. Yet, many outside Ukraine remember the UPR primarily for pogroms committed by its troops against tens of thousands of Jewish citizens. Although atrocities against Ukrainian Jews were committed by soldiers serving both the white, anti-Bolshevik, and red armies during the Civil War, the army of the UPR was perhaps the worst perpetrator, the historian Christopher Gilly wrote in 2019. It's completely clear that Petliura did not order pogroms. These were not part of the official UPR policy, Gilly told me. Still, the UPR leadership was reluctant to respond and react to the pogroms in a timely manner, partially because a decent number of people in government seemed to at least understand the motivations of the pogroms. They had some kind of empathy for them. Petliura was assassinated by a Ukrainian Jew, Shlomo Schwarzbard, in retaliation for the pogroms. Dude, listen to this name. I'm just going to say the name, okay? And you just deal with it. Shlomo Schwarzbard, Jewish assassin. Ukrainian authorities have in recent years lionized more horrific figures, such as Roman Shukevich, a leader of the OUNB who was given the rank of captain by Nazi Germany. Shukevich is widely accepted as one of the primary perpetrators of the massacre of around 100,000 Poles in Volhynia and eastern Galicia between 1943 and 1945. According to the Canadian historian John Paul Himka, the Schwarzmanncraft units of Nazi auxiliary police that Shukevich commanded here were routinely used by the Germans to both fight partisans and to murder Jews, although the activities of his specific unit have not been studied in detail. I wonder why. That didn't prevent Viktor Yushchenko, president of Ukraine from 2005 to 2010, from posthumously issuing Shukevich and Bandera the titles of Hero of Ukraine in 2007, although the decisions were eventually overturned by the courts on technical grounds. A metro station in Kiev and a stadium in the western city of Ternopil have in recent years been renamed in honor of Shukevich. This trend shows no sign of slowing. In December 2022, Pushkin Street in the city of Izium, recently liberated from Russian occupation, was renamed Stepan Bandera Street. No Nazis in Ukraine, though. Part of the story of the glorification of figures responsible for mass atrocities lies in the Western Ukrainian narrative of the Second World War being foisted on the country as a whole. Vladislav Davidson, a Jewish Ukrainian writer, told me, Western Ukrainians have traditionally been more nationalistic, but there are 24 regions in the country, Davidson said. Each one has their own memory of World War II, and it just so happens that the Lviv Western Ukrainian version was the one that has been elevated to the status of national memory politics. Oh yeah, big shocker. He added that many in the south and east have less interest in Western Ukrainian heroes. They are of no emotional significance to many Ukrainians in other parts of the countries. It's almost as though the Nazis are in power and are putting forward Nazis. Perhaps most significantly, the rehabilitation of these figures is the result of a search for historical antecedents to Ukraine's fight against Moscow. Don't you think it's weird that the only heroes they can find are Nazi collaborators? Don't you think it's a little strange? Right? Don't you think that maybe Oriza Letsevich, head of the Ukraine program at the Chatham House think tank, said that nationalists cherry pick. What? They basically only take the symbolism that matters for today. What? People identify with the legacy of that radical struggle for independence with the Nazis. As the present war with Russia has escalated, figures who fought for Ukrainian independence and were denigrated by the Soviet Union have risen in popularity in parallel with plummeting opinion of Russian and Soviet leaders. By a poll by Rating, a Ukrainian research institute, shows positive opinions of Bandera soaring from 22% in 2012 to 74% in April 2022. No Nazis in Ukraine, though. Positive views of Petliura similarly rose over the same period. No Nazis in Ukraine. The most contradictory aspect of this is the lionization of figures such as Bandera and Shukovich obscures the reality of modern Ukraine. The country is far from a Banderite fascist state. It is multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multilingual democracy, home to several national minorities, such as Hungarians and Poles. The Muslim minority, composed primarily of Crimean Tatars, is largely pro-Ukrainian. Many live under Russian occupation in Crimea, but still identify as Ukrainian. When Vladimir Zelensky was elected president in 2019, his prime minister was briefly Vladimir Groisman, making Ukraine the only country other than Israel in modern times to be led by a Jewish head of state and head of government. Some of Zelensky's current ministers are Jewish and Muslim. Yeah, this is what the Nazis learned, right? They learned that, just keep things have a couple ethnicities here and there, right? Sparkle them in, and then liberals will make this kind of commentary. This is what makes the cult of figures with historical records that are at best checkered or at worst tainted by mass atrocities so baffling. By insisting on the glorification of historical figures many allies find offensive, Kiev is not only alienating its friends and providing fuel for Russian propaganda to falsely suggest that Ukraine is a fascist state, but actively obscuring the reality of a successful cosmopolitan society. As Davidson put it to me, throughout the modern Ukrainian history, the understanding of Ukraine as an ethno-nation has always lost. The hope among some I spoke to was that as Ukraine writes a new national story for itself in almost real time, it will both find new heroes and form a more nuanced attitude towards old ones. I do hope that as time goes by, we will see the shadow in every historical figure, Lushevitz said. I don't think it's good for Ukraine to be so hooked on the idea of glorification, especially of Nazis and Nazi collaborators. Not all agree. Bandera will continue to be venerated in Ukraine. Oletsky Gonacharenko, a Ukrainian MP, told me, all those who are fighting for Ukrainian freedom will be our heroes. Some of them will have controversial backgrounds, but that will not change the fact that all fighters for Ukrainian freedom will be heroes for us. Maybe you guys should try to find some heroes that aren't Nazi collaborators. Just putting that out there. Isn't it kind of weird? Don't you think it's kind of odd that they can't seem to find any national heroes for their nationalist agenda and their idea of nationalism that aren't Nazi collaborators? Just seems... This is the New Statesman. Support 110 years of independent journalism. Boop, 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 boop. No Nazis in Ukraine, though. I mean, I suspect this is a fairly conservative. They say it's independent, but like, I mean, I feel like if we looked it up, we're gonna find out. Like, yeah, this is a conservative. This is a conservative. How many times can I say the word conservative? I hope you guys are doing well out there. I hope you've been enjoying the articles. I've been really like, I feel like I've been reading and reading, but I'm so happy. I'm so happy that I'm reading these articles, man. Like, there's so much like good stuff happening right now, right? There's so much interesting, finally things are moving, sort of weird things, right? Like, even this headline is insane, right? BlackRock's Larry Fink sees Social Security crisis, says 65 retirement age a bit crazy. These people are psychos, eh? Like, this is just a psychotic thing to say out loud. Like, we all know you're retiring at 65, dude. Like, you're already retired, really. Like, Larry Fink doesn't work. What are you talking about? Like, these fucking guys, man. It kills me. Hey, now's a good time to say like, share, subscribe, hit the bells, hit the whistles, do all the stuff. If you would like to support my channel, please feel free to donate to the Patreon. It gets you into the Discord. It helps you continue with everything. When they finally ban my channel, you'll be able to find me there, right? Because that's what's going to happen. As we plunge more and more towards this fascist state that we're all erecting for some reason, it's only a matter of time. We saw it happen with the start of the Ukrainian war. They purged out a bunch of people. They're definitely going to purge out me. So please tell people I exist. Let your friends know. Let your families know. Let people know. They can come in. They can talk to me. And I can show them things. Dangerous things. I really want to read this article because this is like a confession note. So this is from Angus Deaton, Rethinking My Economics. So I'm just going to go right to the bottom. This is a fairly short article, right? Angus Deaton is the Dwight D. Eisenhower Professor of Economics and International Affairs, Emeritus at the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs and the Economics Department at Princeton University. He is the 2015 recipient of the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences. Like, you can't get much higher than this guy. Like, who's above this guy, right? Like, he's in a very small group of people, right? He doesn't really have peers, you know? There's only a couple of guys who can say, yeah, we're peers with Angus, right? So this guy would be considered a capitalist master, right? In the field of economics, he's a master. And there's just like no debating it. And here he is in his old age after having gotten a Nobel Peace Prize in 2015 and witnessing his field basically shit itself and vomit in the bed, saying, maybe my life's work is a sham. Maybe my life's work is a sham. Let's read. Questioning one's views as circumstances evolve can be a good thing. Oh yeah, and I'd also like to say, guys like this are starting to come to terms with the reality that they've always been part of a religious ideology. That what they thought they were looking at was a science, but in fact it's a religious ideology. Bread Bunny, I will definitely talk about that, okay? I want to read this article. It's only going to be 3 minutes. Economics has achieved much. There are large bodies of often non-obvious theoretical understandings and of careful and sometimes compelling empirical evidence. The profession knows and understands many things, yet today we are in some disarray. We did not collectively predict the financial crisis, and worst still, we have contributed to it through an overenthusiastic belief in the efficacy of markets, especially financial markets, whose structure and implications we understood less well than we thought. Yeah, because you guys aren't reading Marx. Recent macroeconomic events, admittedly unusual, have seen quarreling experts whose main point of agreement is the incorrectness of others. Economics Nobel Prize winners have been known to denounce each other's works at the ceremonies in Stockholm, much to the consternation of those laureates in the sciences who believe that prizes are given for getting things right. Like many others, I have recently found myself changing my mind, a discomforting process for someone who has been a practicing economist for more than half a century. I will come to some of the substantive topics, but I start with some general failings. I do not include the corruption allegations that have become common in some debates. Even so, economists, who have prospered mightily over the past half-century, might fairly be accused of having a vested interest in capitalism as it currently operates. I should also say that I am writing about a perhaps nebulous mainstream, and that there are many non-mainstream economists. Power. Our emphasis on the virtues of free competitive markets and exogenous technical change can distract us from the importance of power in setting prices and wages, in choosing the direction of technical change, and in influencing politics to change the rules of the game. Without an analysis of power, it is hard to understand inequality or much else in modern capitalism. If only there was somebody who had written extensively on what capitalism was and where power came within it. Philosophy and ethics. In contrast to economists from Adam Smith and Karl Marx through John Maynard Keynes, Friedrich Hayek, and even Milton Friedman, we have largely stopped thinking about ethics and about what constitutes human well-being. Just a tacit admission that these guys are psychopaths, that they do not give a fuck about ethics and human well-being. We are technocrats who focus on efficiency. We get little training about the ends of economics, on the meaning of well-being. Welfare economics has long since vanished from the curriculum, or on what philosophers say about equality. When pressed, we usually fall back on an income-based utilitarianism, like the Nazis did. We often equate well-being with money or consumption, missing much of what matters to people. In current economic thinking, individuals matter much more than relationships between people in families or in communities. Oh my God. Efficiency is important, but we valorize it over other ends. Many subscribe to Lionel Robbins' definition of economics as the allocation of scarce resources among competing ends, or to the stronger version that says that economists should focus on efficiency and leave equity to others, to politicians or administrators. But the others regularly fail to materialize, so that when efficiency comes with upward redistribution, frequently, though not inevitably, our recommendations become little more than a license for plunder. Keynes wrote that the problem of economics is to reconcile economic efficiency, social justice, and individual liberty. We are good at the first, and the libertarian streak in economics constantly pushes the last. But social justice can be an afterthought. After economists on the left bought into the Chicago school's deference to markets, we are all Friedmanites now, social justice became subservient to markets, and a concern with distribution was overruled by attention to the average, often nonsensically described as the national interest. Empirical methods. The credibility revolution in econometrics was an understandable reaction to the identification of causal mechanisms by assertion, often controversial and sometimes incredible. But the currently approved methods, randomized controlled trials, difference in differences, or regression discontinuity designs, have the effects of focusing attention on local effects, and away from potentially important but slow-acting mechanisms that operate with long and variable lags. Historians, who understand about contingency and about multiple and multi-directional causalities often do a better job than economists of identifying important mechanisms that are plausible, interesting, and worth thinking about, even if they do not meet the inferential standards of contemporary applied economics. Humility. We are often too sure that we are right. Economics has powerful tools that can provide clear-cut answers, but that require assumptions that are not valid under all circumstances. It would be good to recognize that there are almost always competing accounts, and learn how to choose between them. Second thoughts. Like most of my age cohort, I long regarded unions as a nuisance that interfered with economic and often personal efficiency and welcomed their slow demise. But today, large corporations have too much power over working conditions, wages, and decisions in Washington, where unions currently have little say compared with corporate lobbyists. It's the consequences of my own actions. Unions once raised wages for members and non-members. They were an important part of social capital in many places, and they brought political power to working people in the workplace and in local, state, and federal governments. Their decline is contributing to the falling wage share, to the widening gap between executives and workers, to community destruction, and to rising populism. Darren Acemoglu and Simon Johnson have recently argued that the direction of technical change has always depended on who has the power to decide. Unions need to be at the table for decisions about artificial intelligence. Economists' enthusiasm for technical change as the instrument of universal enrichment is no longer tenable, if it ever was. I am much more skeptical of the benefits of free trade to American workers, and I am even skeptical of the claim, which I and others have made in the past, that globalization was responsible for vast reduction in global poverty over the last 30 years. I also no longer defend the idea that the harm done to working Americans by globalization was a reasonable price to pay for global poverty reduction, because workers in America are so much better off than the global poor. I believe that the reduction in poverty in India had little to do with world trade, and poverty reduction in China would have happened with less damage to workers in rich countries if Chinese policies caused it to save less of its national income, allowing more of its manufacturing growth to be absorbed at home. I had also seriously underthought my ethical judgments about trade-offs between domestic and foreign workers. We certainly have a duty to aid those in distress, but we have additional obligations to our fellow citizens that we do not have to others. I used to subscribe to the near consensus among economists that immigration to the United States was a good thing, with great benefits to the migrants and little or no cost to domestic low-skilled workers. I no longer think so. Economists' beliefs are not unanimous on this, but they are shaped by econometric designs that may be credible, but often rest on short-term outcomes. Longer-term analysis over the past century and a half tells a different story. Inequality was high when America was open and much lower when the borders were closed, and rose again post-Hart-Celler, the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, as the fraction of foreign-born people rose back to levels in the Gilded Age. It has also been plausibly argued that the great migration of millions of African Americans from the rural South to the factories in the North would not have happened if factory owners had been able to hire the European migrants they preferred. Economists could benefit by greater engagement with the ideas of philosophers, historians, and sociologists, just as Adam Smith once did. The philosophers, historians, and sociologists would likely benefit too. Yeah. It'd be really great if we got rid of this fucking cult. It'd be really great if the cult actually learned something, and if these economists actually learned fucking some shit. Like, this is a fucking confession note, as far as I'm concerned. This guy, this Princeton economist, right, Nobel laureate, basically just stood in front of all of us and said, I think my favorite thing that he said in this whole thing, where did he say it? Yeah. Our recommendations become little more than a license for plunder. Boom. Boom. What a great article this is, dude. I'm glad to see that there are at least some people in the profession who are opening up and who are actually beginning to talk about the realities of what's going on. That these guys are starting to actually notice and starting to actually realize that this is a religious ideology. That they're not actually literate, that they don't actually know what's going on. Like, what is this guy saying? Right at the end of this thing. Economists would benefit by greater engagement with the ideas of philosophers, historians, and sociologists. So if they become literate, if they read books and learn something, and actually engage with the society instead of staying in their weird little kooky cult, like, read a fucking book. Like, if that's the end of this guy's career, if this is the last thing that comes out of his career, that, maybe economists should be literate, then it basically just confirms everything I've ever said about these guys. They're a bunch of illiterate rubes. They don't know anything. They're moving forward on a religious ideology exclusively. They're in a weird little kooky death cult that they're trying to destroy everybody so that they can make more invisible dollars on a screen somewhere. Like, get completely fucking wrecked by your own guy, Princeton, Nobel Prize winning, like, emeritus professor. This is like if Dumbledore showed up and was like, hey, this whole wizarding world thing that we're doing is bullshit. Like, I love it. I love it. I'm so glad I read that. So, Bread Bunny. All of this is just burying the big news from today off the Canadian Newswire. Hamster mills. Hey, man. Those hamsters got to earn their keep. Bread Bunny asks, John, what's going to happen when French troops set foot in Ukraine? Putin has said that the red line will lead to nuclear war. Are we going to blow up the earth in the next couple of years? I mean, we'll see what France does. Like, it's just so difficult for me to believe that Macron would do it. Like, it's so difficult for me to believe that the French would go along with it. Like, it's such an obviously suicidal act. But the issue that we're really facing, Oh, I want to say hi to Mischievous Corin. I think this is your first time here. Good to see you. Like, share, subscribe. Do the stuff. Commie Economist. Good to see you again. Mikhail, you changed your thing. Well done. When empires die and when societies die. Oh, wonderful. Good to see you, man. When they die, they start to act completely irrationally. They don't know. They don't know what to do. They reach for the only solutions and the only acts that they've ever done, which are usually major acts of violence and things that are very egregious. I find it very difficult to believe that the rest of the world would just watch Macron do this. Like, that's the big thing, right? Like, it's so suicidal. It's so stupid. And it's that stupidity, I think, that is so incredible. It's such a stupid thing to do. It would absolutely draw the entirety of NATO into a larger conflict because it's going to trigger an alliance and it's going to trigger a bunch of shit. But I actually think that if Macron did it, so let's say that Macron actually does it, right? Let's pull up the map. Macron decides to lose his mind. He's just completely demented. His own citizens likely fall into revolt immediately, right? They've done it already under his watch. They know how to. They're organized to do it. They're not going to just watch him send troops. And I think the number is 60,000. That's the number, right? So the French are going to go what? Through Germany, through Poland, into Ukraine, right? And so I think that this act would destroy NATO, because France sending troops into Ukraine would trigger the alliance, would call the banners, so to speak. The horns would blow. There's going to be there's going to be more than one state that's in NATO that is not going to answer the call. They're going to look at what France is doing and they're going to go, that is a bad fucking idea. And we are not going to support it. We are not on board for that. And they're just not going to do it. Like, every single time Macron stands up and starts talking about this, people within NATO, Orban in Hungary, I think has probably been the most vocal. A bunch of people are just like, that's a stupid fucking idea. Because guess what? It's a stupid fucking idea. And yeah, I think you're right about that, Bread Bunny. Like, I think it's especially true of France. I think that France, like, Burkina Faso just happened, right? It's a former French colony, right? Like, you're seeing, like, France is losing its grip on its former colonies. We had a conversation with somebody who's from Gabon recently, or claimed to be from Gabon, right? And what happened this year in Gabon was a military coup where they overthrew the leadership, the Bongo family, right? It's a former French colony. So they're losing control of their colonies, which means no more free ride for France. No more free shit going into France. And it's happening fast. It's happening swiftly. Because a lot of these places, a lot of these countries in Africa are looking at China and seeing, hey, we got a better deal here. We can have a better arrangement. We can have an international trading partner that's not actually just kicking in our door and overthrowing our governments and treating us like animals. They actually talk to us. They don't come in with demands, right? They say, this is what we would like to see, and here's the trade arrangement that we're going to make. Here's a deal. So I think France is just panicking. I think the French power structure is totally panicking, and they don't know what to do. I don't think that they can face the humiliation of losing this war. Like, the West losing this war in Ukraine is a major humiliation. Like, it's a major humiliation. This is more humiliating than Iraq and Afghanistan. This is more humiliating than that. This is NATO and the West. Like, these previous humiliations were like, we went in there, we smashed up the place, we stole a bunch of resources. We did like a kind of like neo-colonial project and extracted a bunch of stuff, and then when we were tired of it, we left. Right? And then the moment we left, any infrastructure or anything we put in place just immediately fell apart. Literally, Afghanistan, the Taliban took over like a week later. The embarrassment after embarrassment, the existence of ISIS. Like, ISIS is primarily made up of Baathists from Iraq, right? So this thorn in the side of everybody because of the destruction of Iraq. They're essentially just a jihadist mercenary group now. And so, but these are like kind of small scale humiliations, and like the United States at least leaves on its own terms, right? They go in, they smash the place up, they steal resources, they pretend like they won, they say mission accomplished, and then they fuck off, right? So it's like humiliating, but not in a like we outright got defeated. Well, they're outright getting defeated. This is an outright defeat, right? That they funded neo-Nazis in Ukraine to start a conflict in the Donbass region, basically saying to Russia, what are you going to do about it? And Russia said, well, we're going to fight about it. And they went in there, and now they're winning. And by my estimation, they've won. Right? We literally have a phone call between Macron and Zelensky where Zelensky is saying, we're going to surrender. Like, we're going to negotiate peace. That means the war is over. That means they lost. Right? And I don't think that NATO and Europe can handle it. I think that we're hitting in like a very deep, and I think that there are people in Europe who have drunk the Kool-Aid and believe that Putin's going to march right across. That he's just going to march right across, and that's his ambition, even though he's never said so. Right? And he's been very clear about what it is he does, and he always does what he says he's going to do. So I think that France is freaking out. I think that the populace just recently had like a revolt, like a revolutionary level revolt. You could see the footage. Didn't happen that long ago. Right? Like fucking like yesterday. Their external colonies are collapsing. The power structure, the capitalist power structure within France is collapsing. And on top of that, they're losing this major military investment that they've put in. And I don't think that they can handle it. But so I think that France is going to have, and they're not the only one. Like, we're seeing what's happening in the United Kingdom, right? We're seeing Italy go completely fascist, right? Its current leadership is absolutely fascist. We're seeing Germany, their leadership, the German people just went through a massive protest movement, just fucking like yesterday. They just went through a massive protest unit because their leadership was caught meeting up with members of neo-Nazi organizations. So, like, they're in a crisis. This is a massive crisis of capitalism. And what's so funny is that the last time there was a crisis this bad of capitalism, it was because communism was coming up underneath them. Like, post-World War I, communists were coming up underneath them and starting to take factories over and starting to do serious shit. Right? Communists were starting to take over in major parts. The communist movement in Italy, for example. But now, this time, there's none of that because they murdered all those people. Right? They subordinated a huge section of the populace. Right? There's obviously struggle. There's obviously that kind of thing happening. You can see it in the big protest movements and everything that's going on. But now it's just capitalism collapsing of its own accord. It's just the system of capital collapsing under its own weight. And so NATO is in a major crisis because it doesn't know why it exists anymore. It can't win wars, right? It can't win conflicts. Like, I think Libya was probably the only conflict that it actually, quote unquote, won. But, like, look what that turned out to be. Right? That was just a total fucking disaster. I guess they won in Iraq, if you want to call it a win. Like, they don't win wars. They seem to be alienating the entire rest of the world wherever they go. And one of their leaders is literally talking about sending troops into Ukraine. Here's what's actually going to happen, okay? Like, forget about nuclear war, okay? Like, if the nukes start to fly, then it's over, right? There's no such thing as a rule of law. Money is pointless. Like, there's no reason to listen to anybody. There's no such thing as authority. You can just do what you want, and you should, if the nukes start to fly, right? Like that, for real. If France goes over to Ukraine, then the Russians will kill the French. That's what will happen. That the French will march their troops into the same thresher that the Ukrainians walked into, and they'll lose. Why? Because the French are going to send 60,000 troops, and the Russians are going to call up 1 million troops. That's what's going to happen. That the Russians are invested in this conflict as an existential threat. That they view what's happening in Ukraine as a major, massive existential threat to them as a nation state. That they are in no bullshit mode about it. That the anti-war movement that exists in Russia is small. Putin will call up reserves, and those reservists will go. So while Macron is sending 60,000 troops to Ukraine, Putin will be drawing up 1 million troops and sending them to Ukraine. who incidentally they have been training already. Like, this is over. It's just a matter of how much more blood and gold do you want to spend? That's really what we're looking at. How much more blood and gold do you want to spend? And if France wants to get directly connected into this and wants to march into Ukraine and wants to actually engage in this, that's going to call the banners. And a bunch of these states are going to say no. A bunch of these states are going to say no. And that's the end of NATO. States will begin withdrawing. There'll be not a lot of support. There isn't a lot of support amongst the public to do this. You're not going to successfully call a draft. I can't imagine one of these nations. I can't imagine Italy calling a draft. I can't imagine France calling a draft. Germany calling a draft. Like, I just don't think that's going to go. Right? Like, I just don't think that's going to happen. I think that you would be looking at an overthrow. I think that's what it would be. And so France marching into Ukraine is the end of NATO. It's definitely the end of the French military. Like, they're not going to, like, you're going to have a whole bunch of, like, green troops who have never actually stepped into a combat situation fighting a bunch of guys that have been fighting for a year and a half now. Like, you're going to be outnumbered. You're going to be outgunned, right? Like, France doesn't have a military economy. France isn't producing tanks en masse, weapons and guns and shit. Russia is. Russia's been doing that for a while now. Russia has militarized their economy, and Russia can upscale that. Like, if this turns into a slugfest between Russia and France, I know who wins. And it's not France. And it's not close. And again, France is going to be marching into a region where Russia has air supremacy. Like, I just think it's a suicide mission. I think it's a total suicide mission. It's going to call the banners, and the banners will not respond. Because the banners understand that's a suicide mission. And for what? What do you gain? What benefit do you get? Bragging rights? Like, get the fuck out of here. So I think that finally, if it's not sense will prevail, it will be self-preservation will prevail. Because it's extremely believable to me that if Macron stands up and says he's going to send troops, that he's going to have people outside his door that night. Like, literally as he's making the announcement, people will show up at his house. Like, it's not going to be... people aren't going to go, well, I guess we're going off to... Like, literally his populace was outside the parliament surrounding it, burning things. Yesterday. You think they're just going to quietly go along with this decision? No. Like, no, I don't think so. So I think that what's going on is that NATO is facing an existential threat. Or not an existential threat, but a crisis, an existential crisis. It doesn't know why it exists. It doesn't know what it's for. It doesn't know what goal it's seeking to achieve. It doesn't know the purpose of its own existence. And fundamentally, I think that, like, historically, you take a look at the history of Europe, and Europe historically goes to war with itself. And it's only when a powerful military arises from Europe that they think about going over to Russia. Right? The idea that that's going to be France, it's just kind of like, nah. So this will only escalate if NATO countries dogpile a collaborative amount of troops into Ukraine. Yeah, I think that that's right, which I don't think is going to happen. Like, you're literally talking about, like, if like the Fourth Reich rises out of Germany, right, and you end up with, like, for a proper military offensive to actually take hold in Europe that actually becomes a serious, credible threat to Russia would require 15 years of preparation. 15 years of steady escalation. Like, maybe a shorter time frame than that now, but even if I have it to 7, like, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Hungary, the United Kingdom, like, these places are going to have to militarize their economies, begin training troops, begin preparing a society for a war, for a serious offensive against Russia. You can't just pull a troop. You can't just pull a trigger with reservists, right? You can't just put a gun in somebody's hands and tell them, like, go off to the front line. It's just not serious. Like, I think that it would be quite pathetic, frankly. Like, I really think that it would be very pathetic. And it would really, in my view, be a total sign of weakness. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's completely illogical. It's stupid. It's a stupid thing to do. It's the kind of thing that somebody does when they're, like, losing in a video game. And they're just like, well, I'm losing this thing, so fuck it. I'll just send all my troops, see what happens. Who knows? Maybe something will happen. But then it goes exactly what you thought it was going to happen. So you just log out. You're just like, oh, this game's over. Well, you can't log out. So the French offensive, the idea that the French are going to actually manage to mobilize an offensive, and that NATO is going to go along with that offensive, and that's going to be supported, and all that kind of stuff, I just don't think so. Like, maybe, like, I'm not a prophet. Like, I'm not sitting here being like, I've gleaned into the future. But, like, I just think the French people themselves won't allow it to happen. Like, that's nuts, man. Like, that's absolutely fucking crazy go nuts. Like, absolutely mask off. Like, balls to the walls. You don't give a fuck anymore. When what France should be doing, when what France absolutely should be doing is it should be trying to reindustrialize itself. It should be trying to provide excellent jobs. It should be trying to provide should be trying to integrate itself into a global economy in a way that makes sense, right? And with the understanding that, like, yeah, we have to make stuff, and we have to design stuff, and we have to create stuff, and we have to be part of this. Or crazy thought. Here's the crazy thought that everybody says I'm crazy for saying. How about you just chill the fuck out? How about that? How about you sit around and just drink some wine, eat some cheese, right? Draw, make some paintings, right? Draw some shit, have sex, go to a beach, and just chill the fuck out, and just be like, wow, you know what's life about? Like, this whole need to create a bunch of junk so that we can have a bunch of junk. Like, I feel like we're going to do it anyway. Like, that's the part about it that I think is so crazy, is that, like, if you just chilled the fuck out and let humans be humans, you know what they're going to do? They're going to create a bunch of junk. Why? Because we love it. Look at the junk I made. Look at this crazy crap. Look at the crazy junk that we're all doing. Right? Well, you think every video game developer and every designer and every movie maker and every artist and every actor and every musician is like, I'm going to have $1 billion. No. They're making the shit that they're making because they want to make it. Because they think that it's valuable somehow, and that they think it's good to express these things. They think it's good to get it out into the world, and they love the music, and they love the craft, and they love practicing it, and they love doing it, and they love sharing it. They're not sitting there with these sort of madcap economist level delusions that like, and then I'll get $1 billion. Like, sure, maybe that'd be cool, but like, we're not fools. So like, we want to do it. We just do it. We make stuff. We do stuff. We craft stuff. We build stuff. We sculpt. We paint. Like, it's who we are. It's how we do. So just chill the fuck out. Like, just chill the fuck out about it. And just let it happen. You don't need to round up a bunch of thugs and send them off to a meat grinder. Right? You don't need to turn your art into blood. You don't need to use your blood as the paint. Like, there's enough gravestones, and you'll get there soon enough. No need to expedite the situation for some kind of concept of glory, some kind of concept of victory. That's unachievable. It's not going to happen. Look, if the Nazis couldn't defeat the Russians, the French aren't. Right? Like, that's just good sense, right? Like, the second I said it, you went, oh yeah, that's right. Like, the fucking Nazis couldn't defeat the Russians. The French are not going to do it. It's not going to be close. It will be an embarrassment. And the rest of NATO will probably just watch it happen. Because, like, I'm not going. I don't know who would. I don't know why anybody would go to this thing. All of these fucking losers with their Facebook flagged, I stand with Ukraine, the yellow and blue bullshit, right? All of these losers changing their social medias to stand with Ukraine, all this kind of stuff. None of them are going. Not a single fucking one. Who's going to this thing? Why? Like, all of the foreign fighters that went at the start of the thing are gone. Yep, Isaac, the West trained Ukrainian troops for 8 years and now are gone. Yeah, at this point, any alliance will be viewed by everyone as a surrender into yet another vassal state, and they brought it on themselves. Look, I think that the sooner Ukraine negotiates peace, the better it is for them. That they're certainly going to lose this territory. This territory is gone. They're not getting this back. The Donetsk region, like this whole conflict, that it's over. So that's gone. The longer this progresses, the worse it gets. Right? That this line can move forward and move forward and move forward and move forward. I think that from Russia's position, they don't want to... they don't want this section here. This is where the real Nazism lives, right over in this area. Right? They're not interested in Western Ukraine. They don't want to govern it. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to touch it. They don't want to do any of that kind of stuff. I have seen loose suggestions, nothing really official though, but like I've seen loose suggestions that this section starts to get chewed up by Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, even Belarus. You could start to see like Lviv. We have a claim from 1602 on Lviv, Yomp, and they just eat up Lviv, right? But like, what really happens if Ukraine gets chewed up and then all that's left of it is like Kiev? Like, that's just basically a dead end nothing. They've got no resources. They're finished. Right? And the longer this goes on, that's the result. Like, they should be negotiating peace. And any negotiated peace is for sure a humiliating loss for NATO. And they know it. They're fully aware of it. And what makes this dangerous, and it is dangerous, right, is that this puts NATO into an existential crisis where it begins to question the reason it exists. Because if it can't win wars, like the way that the West views itself, right? If it can't win wars, then it's worthless, right? It doesn't have a concept of solidarity. It doesn't believe in things like just living equitably, trading peacefully. It sees itself through a white supremacist lens. That's how Europe and that's how the United States views itself, through a white supremacist lens, through a lens of supremacy. And so if it can't be supremacist, then why does it exist? Right? If it can't be number one, then it's nothing. And it's going to throw NATO into an existential crisis. I don't think that NATO survives. If it does survive, it'll be reconfigured. It'll be different. And historically speaking, right? Historically speaking, Europe has a war with itself. Because that's what Europe do. Right? That's how Europe roll. Like Germany's right there. Right? I don't know if you guys are big history buffs, but the big war that was fought came out of Germany. And their chosen target, the world. And would you believe it? It was actually close. Yeah. Like Germany's right fucking there. Italy's already gone fascist. Like, shit's gonna go down. Because that's how they roll. Like, that's how they do in Europe. Like, and they can't seem to help themselves. It just seems to be who they are. Convenient that UK left, so France is only nuclear power. Yeah, that is a bit wild, isn't it? Like, it is France, eh? Like, I think France is the only one that has nukes. They're just sitting there, just rattling that saber, man. And look, I do think it's completely possible that just like, no, you know what? I'm stepping down from what I was just about to say. I don't actually think that it's credible or believable that a nation starts throwing nukes, and I'll really tell you why. Because it really isn't as simple as like the president going flip press, right? Like there's a process. There's a process to it. And the only and the people who are going to launch the nuke are going to know what they're doing. Like, they're going to know that this is the end of human civilization. They're going to know that what they're doing is destroying the planet. They're going to know it. They're going to be aware that this is going to be just full-scale eradication. Right? They're going to be very aware of that. Or at least they're going to be very aware that they are setting that into motion. That's now on the table if they do what they're planning on doing. And so the only group that's actually going to do it are going to be like true, open, straight up, like you ever play Fallout 3? Right? The first town you get to in Fallout 3, there's a nuclear bomb in the center of the town. And there's a group of people that worship the nuclear bomb. They call themselves the follower of Adam. And they're all worshiping the nuclear bomb. Megaton was the name of the city, yeah. Like, we need to see that kind of people. Like, we need to see people who are literally like carting out a nuclear bomb and being like, the nuclear bomb will cleanse us. Cleanse us, O great nuclear atom, and make us greater than we were before. You shall spread your goodness across the plane of reality, and we shall become stronger through your green basking glow. Like, that's what we need to see. And until we see that, I just don't think it's credible. Like, I just don't think it's a credible thing to believe. Zionists are nationalists. Like even the Nazis were interested in self. Like, even the Nazis weren't suicidal, right? Like, we're talking about a group of people that are suicidal. That's really what I'm talking about. Like a death cult, like a proper, straight up suicide death cult on a mass scale. And you think about the amount of people that would need to be involved in it, right? The amount of people, like, it's not just one guy flipping a switch. Like, there's a process. Like, there's a technical, you've got to actually go talk to people. It would take some seriously misanthropic people who want to flip the game board if they don't get to win. Like, can I like be straight about the nuclear bomb thing in Israel? I don't think that's real. I just don't think there's nukes in Israel. Like, I just don't. Like, I think that they have spread that into the society, that there's nukes in Israel because it benefits Israel to shake that rattle. But I don't think there's nukes in Israel. Like, the only way that Israel could get nukes is from the West, right? And there's just like no West, like, yeah, sure, we'll give this like fledgling military base that is just getting its feet on the ground, that's surrounded by enemies, right? That might not work, incidentally. Like, this whole thing could get routed out, right? We're gonna go ahead and put nukes in that region. Like, I guess these guys are super stupid, but like, I also think it's completely unnecessary, right? It's unnecessary to give Israel nukes. They don't need them, right? They are in essence a vassal state of the United States, right, and Europe, right? So of NATO, if you prefer, but really the United States. Like, the United States owns Israel. If the United States wanted to destroy Israel, it could do it today. And it could do it just by defunding it. It could literally pass a one-sentence law. No more money to Israel. And then Israel would die. That's what would happen. Without the support from the West, Israel would die. Current nuclear technology and current nuclear bombs means that you can launch a nuke and it will achieve target status in 6 minutes. Six minutes. Right? I just listened to a podcast. I forget her name. This was a lady on Lex Friedman. She was talking about our nuclear capabilities. 6 minutes. Start to finish. 6 minutes. Israel doesn't need nukes. If I was part of the military command in the United States and they were talking about giving a nuclear bomb, a single nuclear bomb to Israel, I'd be like, no, what are you talking about? Why? Why would we ever do that? That's completely unnecessary. Like, be like strapping a missile to your car and saying it's for defense. Like, you don't need that. It'd be like you having like a howitzer in your house and saying it's for home defense. Like, it's just completely unnecessary, completely unwieldy, totally chaotic, completely unpredictable. And I also think that the number one reason why the West would never actually permit Israel to have a nuclear bomb is that it empowers Israel. Like, you don't want the dog you have on the leash to be bigger than you. Right? Like, if you've got a dog on a leash, you want to know that you're in control of that dog, and you don't want that dog to be bigger than you and a better fighter than you. You don't want that dog to think that maybe it can fight back. Right? Giving Israel a nuke means that they can bite back. Means that they can start making demands. Means that they can go off the hook. And there's like a history, right? Saddam Hussein was their guy. Saddam Hussein was a CIA trained asset who overthrew the government of Iraq on behalf of the United States, and then he cut loose and started to do his own shit. And the United States had to reel him in. What if they gave him a nuke? I just don't think so. I just don't think so. Like, I think that they have they've told a story, right? I think they've told a story because it's a convenient story to have. That's what I think. That, like, it's convenient. It keeps your enemies guessing. It keeps them uncertain. It makes it so that maybe we can't push in. Maybe we can't do it. But remember, there was like a full-scale invasion of Israel. There's been several attempts. Lebanon very recently fired like 700 rockets at Israel. Like, has a new bookshelf. Good to see you, by the way. I haven't said hello to you. They stole it from Georgia nuclear power plant, and Norwegians helped them. In the U.S., Georgia. Like, you're talking about the nuke? That would be so wild, though. Like, here's the reason why I think it would be completely wild. I think it would be not in Israel's interest. Because, like, Israel is surrounded by a bunch of, like, caliphate Muslims, right? That all hate Israel. Can you imagine if, like, an organization like ISIS got access to a nuke? This is how it happens. Like, this is actually how it happens. You let a state like Israel have access to a nuke, right? And then they just get overrun. Yeah, Israel does shit not in its own interest all the time. Fuel from Georgia. Fuel from Georgia nuclear power plant has been traced in clothing of Israel workers. Norway has sent them heavy water after World War II. Yeah. But what I'm like, this is the thing, right? Like, it seems a bit too, like, where are these nukes then? Like, where is it? Right? Like, it just seems a little too circumstantial, if you understand me. Yeah, this is a risk with Pakistan too. Unstable government with nukes. But I mean, the United States has proven that you have to have nukes. Countries that give up their nukes die. Very straightforwardly. Countries that give up their nuclear stockpile die. They've made that very, very clear. Like, to me, if I was Egypt, Algeria, Chad, Niger, Sudan, you know, any of these places, that would be the only lesson that I would take away from this. Oh, you need a nuke. And once you got it, you don't let it go. Like, under no circumstances. Right? Like, you take a look at good old North Korea. Right? It's saber rattles its nuclear bombs as often as it possibly can. Why? Because they know what's up. They're not fucking around. John, I think you want to believe that our leadership and militant systems are less rabid than they've shown themselves to be. It's not about rabid, it's about suicidal. That's the difference. It's not about stupidity. It's not about psychosis, right? Like, it's because we've seen, and I think there's a lot of credible evidence that shows that these guys are deeply stupid and deeply psychotic. I think that both of those things are true. That the military leadership in the United States is just full of absolute dullards and people who are absolutely like psychotic climbers. I think that that's like self-interested psychotic climbers. I think that's all true. But now we're adding in a third element. And it's this third element that I don't see. Right? And so if you want to convince me of what you're talking about, you got to convince me on this point, which is suicidal. Like, not just like callous disregard leading to disaster a la climate change, right? Because like lots of people are still in this stupid haze of just like, well, it's not going to be so bad. We can just adapt to it. And, oh, you know, there's things that are going to happen. And, but, you know, that's going to be what, blah, 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 right? No one wants to actually grapple with the reality that like the whole thing can just escalate really quickly and we can just get fucked, right? But that's not suicidal. That's kind of just stupid delusional denialism. Like, the launching of a nuclear bomb and the response to that, right? The whole situation and everything wrapped up in it requires suicide. It requires a suicidal inclination. And I just don't see it. Can't remember. Good to see you. Yeah, Bread Bunny, I think that's a good connection. Like, this is a good argument, right? Literally, the oil companies are destroying human civilization. They know they are doing it. They're just doing it more while lying to us. But I think that is wrapped up in denialism. I think that that's wrapped up in delusion, right? That they're like, yeah, sure, whatever. Some ice will melt. Sure, whatever. Like, water will go up, I guess. You know, whatever. You know, it'll do a little bit of damage, I guess, but whatever. Right? Like this, that to me isn't suicide. Right? Like it's not a personal suicide. And that's kind of what I'm really driving towards. The person that presses the button understands that they are dead. And they know that. And that, like, for them to press that button and, like, yeah, and CH, I think this is actually more likely, right? An accident. That, to me, seems way more likely that it's going to happen on accident. That it's going to be, like, a Doctor Strangelove sort of situation. That's what I would be more concerned about. Like, just some event happens and then it puts people in a tizzy and they've got 6 minutes to respond to it and they all just start launching nukes and things just go off the handle because in a tense moment some bullshit just happened. Right? Like, that to me seems the most likely thing to happen. Well, the person who thinks the billionaire bunker can survive climate change can think it'll survive nukes. Dude, I cannot think of a better punishment for people. Like, I think people have a real, like, fallout, like, kind of like a nostalgia-ish, or not nostalgia, but just like a romanticized vision of what this bunker life is going to be like. I cannot think of it, I straight up, if somebody said to me, okay, John, I need you to design a punishment for the person who saw climate change coming, had the wealth to stop it, or saw the nukes coming and had the wealth to stop it, but decided instead to, like, preserve themselves and escape. Right? I need you to find a punishment for that person My punishment would be to put him in a fucking bunker. Like, okay, we'll take this person, we'll isolate them out of their wealth and power and whatever. We'll put them underground, out of the sun, out of nature, out of reality. We'll put them in a fucking bunker, and they'll probably go insane and shoot themselves. Like, all they'll have is the knowledge of their own solitude and their own patheticness, and how isolated and alone and stupid and fragile they are. And all they get to do for the rest of their life is watch themselves decay, with the knowledge that there's nothing new coming. There's no new information. There's no new thoughts. There's no new ideas. There's no new anything on the horizon for them. That their life's journey from this point forward will be to exactly live in a tomb and slowly decay. And that's all they're going to do. And God help them if they go down there with people. God help them if they go down there with people. Yeah, I'd imagine fresh water is harder to harvest for drinking when it mixes with salt water, yeah. Yeah, the cowboy riding the military through the sky. Dude, Doctor Strangelove was like a perfectly made film. It really was. It was like a perfectly made film. Like, every scene and every shot and every character, and they really captured like the lunacy of it and the silliness of it. And like I think the man riding the missile down, the fact that he thought he was doing it for like good reasons, and he thought he was doing it for glory. Like, he knew he was going down there to die, but he was like, for America. Boy, did that wounded my heart, and it still wounds my heart. I'm sure they have underground forests and thousands of people surveying them down until reactors can finally run out of fuel hundreds of years. I mean, they're not gods, right? Like, they're not gods. Like, underground forests, like, I just think that like these places are going to be like tombs. They're just like, a tomb is such a good word. Like, it's such a, they're going to be like a catacomb. They're just going to be like, and like, I think the people that are going to be in there are going to be like, I think they'll go mad. Like, I don't think they'll be able to handle it. I don't think they'll be able to handle themselves. Like, I think their own human frailty is gonna their own human frailty is gonna be their undoing. Trump is very gold symbol of the fact humanity's elites can't change. Well, I mean, of course they can change, just, you know, people need to die off. Literally extracting the world's wealth to build a very comfortable tomb. Yeah. That's what I think is so funny about our wealthy and our rich, is how pathetic they are. They don't build anything. They don't create anything. They don't make anything. And their ideas are dumb and really bad. Right? Like, Mark Zuckerberg is a good example, right? So he makes his money by basically making like a digital phone book, right? Like, that's Facebook. It's a digital phone book. And it's like a combination of the phone and the phone book. And of course they fucked it up, right? It's not as good as a phone book. But that's kind of what it is. And so capitalism gets in the way and makes a worse product than we had previously. Okay, great. And that's how he made his money. Well, what's he done since? What's he actually made since he took over this digital phone book? Meta, I guess. which was basically just like pitching the idea of a video game lobby. Like, that's my favorite, man. That really was a moment where I was like, oh, these guys are actually fucking dumbasses. That, like, for a period of time, they were really trying to pitch at people, like, you'll have a virtual space where you can meet up and it'll be all this kind of stuff. And literally one guy stood up and was like, you mean like a game lobby? And it basically finished it. Like, all of the millennials looked at all of the boomers who were looking at Zuckerberg being like, wow, listen to this meta thing this guy's talking about. Wow, listen to meta. And all the millennials looked at all the boomers and were like, we've been doing this for 20 years. Bear witness. A Call of Duty gaming lobby. And all the boomers went, nah. And that was it. That's like the best idea they've ever had. Like, at least the billionaires of yore, 100 years ago in the Gilded Age, the billionaires built things. Grand Central Station was built by a billionaire. Billionaires would take pieces of their wealth and they would actually build structures that the public could use, that were useful. They would build subways, right? They would do things. And they didn't build them thinking, and this will be an investment that I can turn around and make more money with, because they already had so much fucking money. Like, the moment our billionaires die, like, Carnegie Hall still stands. You can go to it. Right? The moment our billionaires die, they will be forgotten. A guy like Bill Gates is already inconsequential. You don't think about Bill Gates at all. Right? He's basically irrelevant to you. And the moment he dies, you'll forget about him. Right? You'll be like, oh yeah, he was like involved in computing and he got by, and there was like Steve Jobs and all that kind of stuff, I guess. But it's not like you're going to tell your kids about him. Right? It's not like you're going to relay that story to them. Like, your kids will not know who that guy is. Right? Like, unless they, like, care. But, like, they don't. Like, they're not gonna. Like, do any of these guys even make it to the status of somebody like Edison? Like, do any of these guys... So, like, the moment they die, they'll be forgotten. Like, when Musk dies, he'll be forgotten. When Buffett dies, he'll be forgotten. Like, Munger is already forgotten. Nobody cares about him. Like, nobody even knew he existed, except, like, weirdos like me. Right? Like, all these billionaires are going to die, and we're going to forget about them the second they die. And they're going to leave nothing behind. And, like, a lot of the projects that they're part of will probably improve for it. Anyway, I feel like we've reached the end of this one. I'm over time. I'm glad that you're all here, you know? I'm glad that you all tuned in. It makes me feel good to know that there are people still listening in to a kooky old guy like me. Glad I got to read some articles for you guys. Glad to got to talk about them. I don't think I got through everything, so tune in tomorrow, and we'll continue the fun. Like, share, subscribe, right? Hit the bells, hit the whistles. If you would like to donate to my Patreon, it is in the description. Every little bit helps. It gets you into the Discord, where you can continue this journey. What time tomorrow? It's 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every day, or every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being, walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.